What's up, cousins? It's time for me to update y'all about the spiritual activity that's been going on in my house. Come on, come sit down. Okay, so as y'all know, well, as most of you know, I work night shift at the hospital. And so whenever I'm working night shift, my daughter is with my mom. So my mom called me one night and she's like, hey, yeah, we've been hearing a lot of walking and stuff. So she's still hearing walking, but she said this time it hears like it's coming from the attic. Now, mind you, when I first moved up in here, I made sure that I did this. Hold on. So when I first moved in here, I had the police go up there. I had the landlord go up there because I wanted to make sure that she didn't have any extra things in there that needed to be taken out. But I had the police go up there because I wanted to make sure wasn't nobody squatting up there. Okay? Because cousin don't play that. So fast forward, I ended up being off of work for like 2 days. And while I was off work, I remember I got up to get something to drink and it felt so cold in the kitchen, almost like somebody had the door open. Okay, the heat, it was hot everywhere else, but it felt so cold in the kitchen. And I was like, what the heck? So I turned around and I saw something out the corner of my eye run to the back where the rooms are. So I ended up walking to the back to check on my daughter. I look in her room. She's still knocked out, still sleeping. She seems like she's peacefully sleeping. Doesn't seem like she's having a nightmare. We're good. So I start walking back up front. But while I'm walking to the front, back to the kitchen, I'm praying over the house. And so I'm cleaning out the cup that I just drank out of, and I hear my trash can moving. So I stopped. You know how when you hear something, you just instantly stop all movement? I turned the water off. I stopped moving, and I hear my trash can. It was trash day. I took it out, early that morning and put it at the end of the driveway. And I said, what the heck? But I hear it coming. Like I can hear it being dragged. So I finally go to the door. Of course, I didn't open it right away because who's dragging or taking my trash can? Then I see my neighbor. She has these lights, these detection lights. Whenever somebody moves, her lights come on. And it stopped moving as soon as her lights came on. As soon as it reached my driveway area, the lights came on. I saw it. Then I, of course, kind of like peeked out the front in the blinds, and I don't see anybody. And so finally I was just like, what the heck? So I turned the side light on and I don't see any footprints. It had snowed a few hours before that, so you're gonna see some footprints. All I saw were the trash drag marks. That's it. The footprints aren't gonna disappear. Come on now. Fast forward, me and my baby girl are having mommy-daughter time. And, we're just having a good old time. And kids already say things out of the blue already as it is. And so what she said next kind of, had me, what you talking about? So she was like, yeah. She said, Mommy, I don't like when you go to work because she said they make a lot of noise upstairs. Mind you, we don't have a basement. Okay? And we also don't have an upstairs. And so instantly, I'm just like, is she talking about the attic? So I said, are you talking about the attic? She's like, yeah, the stairs that come down. Now, mind you, I've never pulled this down around my kid. I didn't even pull it down. I had my landlord and the police officers do it. So my daughter told me, she said, she referred to the spirits as they. So it's multiple spirits. She said, they go up there to watch out for the house. I said, okay, I want to know what they're watching out for. I said, do you talk to them? She said, only one. Now, mind you, it didn't hit me until later on what was really going on. I'm going to get to that in a second, though. So when I finished questioning my daughter about the spirits that are up here in the attic, she told me that they are there because they're protecting the house. I said, so it's a lot of them? I said, how many are there? And so she started doing this. And she made it to the number 6. So 6 spirits in the attic. And I was just like, man, I wonder why all of them up there like that. So fast forward, I tell my mom about it. Me and my mom are talking. She prayed. She said, she's like, when I prayed, she said, I didn't feel anything bad. She said, so maybe there's something that's going on and they need to be here at the moment. But my mom also said that she saw this male spirit and this woman spirit like walking back and forth up and down the hall when she opened up the door. And she was like, almost like they're standing guard. And I said, okay, what's going on? They need to tell us something. What's about to happen? Around that time, there was a man on the run. He had unalived a couple people, probably a couple miles from our home, right? And he was still on the run. They hadn't caught him yet. They were saying that they think that he's hiding in the area. And so my mom said that she had a dream that there was a man in her car sleeping. And so I said, you had a dream of a man in your car sleeping? She said, yeah, but that's not the first time I had that dream. She said, I just can't see the man's face. And so I was worried that it was possibly the man who was on the run. And so my mom was like, she's like, we just gonna pray and we just gonna see what happens next, where it goes. So fast forward, my mom calls me and she's like, hey, I got in my car and it smelled like cigarette smoke. And I said, what? I said, were your doors locked? She said, I thought I locked them, but she was like, it smelled like cigarette smoke in my car. My mom does not smoke and she don't allow smoking in her car. Okay. Fast forward, she's taking Simone to school for me and I get Simone in the car. I go back in the house and she told me that she saw this man walk from the garage to the side door. I'm still in the house because I just gotten off night shift. So I'm about to be knocked out. So she turned around and she said that she saw this man walk from the garage to the side door. He didn't make eye contact with her. He just stood there and stared straight ahead like he was standing guard. And she said he slowly disappeared. She couldn't see him anymore, but she knew he was right there. Fast forward again, a few days later, this man is caught. Okay. Now my daughter, we don't allow her to watch like the news and stuff. She's young. She's 5. So we don't allow her to watch the news and stuff like that. But a few days later, my daughter was like, oh, all of them are gone. They're gone. She's like, they must have went home. And so I'm like, talking about the spirits. And she was like, yeah, they must have went home. But me and my mom look at the news and they caught the man who had unalived those people and the one who had been on the run. So I think that they were here because he really was hanging around near our home. I really do believe that.
Okay, I have a spooky story for you guys. In January, my family and I went to Colorado, and I have always said that I feel like spooky things follow me. I don't know if it's a coincidence, maybe it's in my head. But my brother and his girlfriend invited my husband and I and my children to Colorado. And great, cool. They got an Airbnb. Everything was fine. First night there, I tell my husband, something just feels weird about this house. And he's like, tell me why I felt the same way. It just felt, I don't know, I couldn't explain it, but it was just, it was off. That night he couldn't sleep, so he was just walking around. He went to the kitchen, drank some water, he got some snacks. He's sitting on the couch and he says that he's looking at me like, what are you doing here? Just standing there. And he looks and he could have sworn he saw me, but he looks and there's nobody there. He has that feeling of someone watching him. That part's annoying. So anyways, he has the feeling that somebody is watching him. He feels uneasy, so he's like, hey, I'm gonna go lay back down. That was night 1. Night 2, we are asleep, knocked out, and my son wakes us up and he's bawling his eyes out. He's 4.5 years old. We have never co-slept. He slept in our bedroom, but in his bassinet up until he was about 8 months old, and then he's been in his bedroom ever since. When he's tired, he himself will put himself to bed, close his door, and he's out for the night. He wakes us up and he's crying. We go with him to the room. We lay down with him. We cuddle him. We do all the things that parents do. I'm scratching his back, massaging him, trying to get him to calm down. And he's just... So we don't know what's happening. We are in a different state. And I tell my husband, let's take him to the emergency room. Maybe something's up. We take him to the emergency room. Nothing. So I tell my husband, go to sleep with him in his room. I'll sleep in the other room with our daughter, and that way maybe he's nervous, maybe he's scared, which I don't think that's the case, but we had been hearing things in the middle of the night, some creaks. Next morning, I'm getting ready and I'm straightening my hair and whatever, and I look at the mirror and something catches my eye and I'm like, Okay, so I call my husband and I'm like, hey, can you meet me in the restroom? He goes into the restroom. He looks at the mirror and literally the mirror, it says help. I'm not even kidding. I swear. And he's like, maybe your brother and his girlfriend are messing with us because they knew that we felt a little uneasy. My brother is a scaredy cat. So we call my brother. He comes and I'm like, what do you see? And he looks and he's literally like, hell no. And I'm like, bruh, shut up. Like, stop messing with me. And he's like, I swear. Like, why would I do that? I look at his girlfriend and she's like, babe, no, we did not do that. So we're like, was that always there and we didn't notice it? Is it new? I don't know. We end up leaving. We drove there. We end up leaving. We forget my son's geeky, his blanket that he's had since literally he was a newborn. So I call my brother and I'm like, hey, we left Junior's blankie there. I need it. I'm bawling. I'm crying. And he's like, okay, I'll check. He goes and he checks. He's like, it's not there. I was like, okay, I need you to check. And he's like, okay, I'll check again. I was like, John, find it. And he said that he had completely removed all the blankets, everything. It wasn't there. So I was like, oh my God, did we leave it at the hotel? Like, what is happening? I call the hotel. Nothing's in the lost and found. So at this point, I'm like, okay, we lost his blankie. Next morning, my brother calls me and he's like, Junior's blankie came up. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he was like, we were about to leave the Airbnb. We check and it's just on the bed. I'm like, what do you mean? They're getting ready to leave. Again, they do another round. And the TV in the room that my son was sleeping in is now on. Spooky. So you tell me, was I imagining things? No, I don't think so. It felt heavy there. Did my husband imagine things? Did we imagine this help on the mirror? Like, I don't know. Spooky. But that's also what's kind of scary about staying in someone else's house, because I'm like, okay, what happened here? But what do you guys think? Are we making shit up? Or was something in that house?
Ever wondered if the battle between good and evil is real? Then this is a story you'll want to hear because it deals with exactly that. This is Sandy's story, and it was submitted to Spooky Scary Storytime, which, if you're new here, is the series where we share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that they've ever experienced. And Sandy's story is a generational one. I think it's extremely interesting, and it starts with her great-grandmother, Eleanor. Eleanor was the great-grandmother on her dad's side, and she did know that she lived to 96 years old, and her dad and grandmother would always tell her stories about Eleanor and how she had special gifts. He was told that Eleanor was a very sweet woman who lived in Michigan throughout the entirety of her life. She was also apparently very devoted to the Episcopal Church. Eleanor had provided for her family through the Great Depression by reading tea leaves for the local community. She had been struck by lightning and survived twice in her life, and also had a strange habit of sleepwalking. Sleepwalking started innocently enough, with her being found in random places throughout the house, but eventually she would leave the house and be found all over town, often being brought back by the police in her nightgown. The habit became so frequent that, with Eleanor's permission, her great-grandfather began locking her in her bedroom at night and sleeping on the couch in the living room to make sure she didn't leave. He would often lock the door and place the key ducked in the room where he slept. And this worked for a little while, until one night he was awoken to the sound of knocking on the door, and he opened the door and there was police and there was Eleanor in her nightgown. Everybody was very confused because the key was in the bedroom door, but he had not unlocked it, and Eleanor didn't know where he kept it as she slept. Eleanor often had premonitions that would come true, and it became so frequent that the rest of her family believed her wholeheartedly anytime she told them that something bad was going to happen. Sometimes when there were plans, Eleanor would look at a family member and say, "No, I see a dark cloud over your head," and that family member would then stay home because they believed her that much. Sandy said that as a child, Eleanor read her tea leaves one time and she was shocked, and that's what made her really believe that she had abilities, because Eleanor knew things about her, secrets that she had kept that nobody else in her family knew. Eleanor also read Sandy's father's cards after he returned from Vietnam, but upon looking at the tea leaves, she turned the cup over and said, "I'm not going to do this." Eleanor read Sandy's mom's tea leaves, and she looked at her and said, "You're going to come into money, but the circumstances coming into that money are not going to be good." Later, Sandy's brother, who was 19, was tragically struck by a train and passed. He was only 19, but he had been in the military, and his life insurance policy was substantial. Her father eventually passed away at the age of 61 from leukemia. Sandy says that all of these stories aren't even really the strangest stories about Eleanor, and the real story starts when Eleanor was 36. All of the rest of the information was just sort of a preface so you could understand her a little bit more. When she was 36, Eleanor went to a theater with a friend, and she sat behind a woman who had large, dangly flower earrings. And Eleanor could not stop looking at this woman, and as they were watching the movie, the woman turned and looked back at her a few times. When the movie ended, Eleanor and her friend were walking out of the theater when she felt someone tap her on the shoulder. She turned around and it was that woman, and that woman says, Eleanor. And Eleanor did not know this woman, had never seen this woman, had never met this woman before. But the woman says, it's okay, don't try to place where you know me. You don't actually know me. I was sent to warn you. Eleanor says, warn me about what? And she says, step to the side, let me talk to you. And she pulls Eleanor away from her friend, and she tells Eleanor 3 things to verify she truly was sent for Eleanor. And these 3 things were apparently things that only Eleanor knew. Secrets and things from her childhood that nobody else who didn't know her wouldn't be able to verify. And she says, I know you have gifts, and there is a spiritual war going on right now. She says, both the sides of good and evil are fighting for the souls of the gifted people here. She says you're one of these people, and the evil side will try to get to you. And the way that they do this is by trying to shake your faith. They're going to target your family, and they're going to make horrible things happen to you that will make you question what side you want to be on. She said, I need you to listen to me and remember to stay on the side of good. That's all Sandy knows about the movie theater experience and about the conversation that happened. She does not know about the 3 specific things this woman said to make Eleanor believe her, but did say that neither her grandmother nor her siblings exhibited any signs of having these gifts. Fast forward to the 1980s, okay? Sandy's alive, she's well, she's a little kid, she's having a sleepover with one of her friends, and her father calls, and he's on his way home from work, and he says, do you guys want Burger King? And of course they did, and so they tell their mom, and their mom gives him the order over the phone, and 2 hours pass when their father finally rolls in. When he walks in, he is pale as a ghost. He looks shocked. He places the bags down on the counter. He walks over to the couch and puts his head in his hands. And Sandy's mom runs over and she goes, what happened? You don't look right, you know? And he says, you would not believe what just happened to me at that Burger King. He starts to tell them all the story about what he just experienced. He says he left work with one of his employees who also happened to be a pastor at a local church. Their plan was to go to Burger King, grab some food, sit down, talk about work, and then he was going to bring food home to his family. After Sandy's dad ordered his food for him and his employee, they're sitting there, they're talking, and an older man walks up to the table, looks at Sandy's dad, and he says, Frank, which is Sandy's dad's name, and he looks at him, and he's trying to place where he knows him from. The man tells him the same thing that that woman in the theater had told his grandmother, Eleanor. He says, you don't know me, don't try to place me, I was sent here to warn you. Says, can we talk in private? And he pulls him off to the side away from his employee, and they're standing there, and this man says, listen, I know you probably won't believe me, but I'm going to tell you 3 things about your life to verify that I was sent here for you. And he starts rattling off things from Frank's childhood that nobody would know. Andy says she also does not know what these 3 things were that this man told her father in order to convince him. But the man says, it's important that I talk to you because we have been trying to warn your ancestors for generations. You need to know that there is a battle between good and evil, and the evil side is vying for your family's souls. He said, it's important to me that you listen to me and you understand to always choose the side of good. And that's when Frank's employee walks up and all of a sudden interrupts the conversation. And he says, I don't think this is a good encounter. I don't know what it is about this man, but I'm not getting a good feeling. And that's when this man supposedly literally just disappears. One moment, Frank and his employee were talking to each other. They look back, the man is gone. There were no doors that he could have exited. Frank, for a second, thinks he's going crazy, and he looks at his employee, the pastor, and he says, did you just see that man, or was I just standing here talking to myself? And the pastor is just as confused. He's like, we were just talking to that man. The experience apparently rattled them both up, and that's why her dad was 2 hours late that night bringing home the food. And he says what's also interesting about this encounter was that her father was also 36 years old, the same age as Eleanor, when this encounter took place. He says that she and her siblings are all in their 40s and 50s now, and none of them have had any experiences of strangers coming up to them to warn them about the battle between good and evil. However, she says she does have children that are in their early 30s, quickly approaching 36, and she is terrified at the thought of someone approaching any of her children. That said, she said she is also intrigued. Now, she does say that she prays over her children, and she's not questioning whether the war between good and evil is real. She just hopes that her family's on the right side of it. One more quick thing she wanted to know that she thought may be related is that both she and her father were born with 6 toes on their right foot, and she says if you look into the fallen angels, they supposedly had 6 fingers and 6 toes. That of course that might be a coincidence, but she is intrigued and interested in her family's relation to perhaps an ancient bloodline. That I'm sharing this anonymously, all of the names have been changed, because she's curious if anyone out there has similar family generational experiences or stories like this. That I don't really need anyone to validate me. I know that these stories are real in my family, and I don't know what's out there watching us or why. Said she's always wanted to talk more about these things with others, but she feels like people would think that she's crazy. So maybe hearing other people's experiences or stories that are similar to this would give her the courage to do so. Let her know your thoughts. If you have a spooky, scary story that you think nobody else would believe, send it in. We'd love to hear it.
Somebody submitted a spooky story about a mimic spirit, and it's terrifying. You may not want to watch this one at night. We're gonna call the person who submitted the story Danny. So Danny said that they didn't believe in mimic spirits before this happened. And now Danny feels as though she can't even be safe in her own home. She moved into her apartment and at first things were normal. Nothing crazy out of the ordinary. After like a month living there, small things started happening. She would hear her name being called from another room, always in a familiar voice. At first it was her mother's voice. So she would hear her mother's voice ever so casually. She was just about to act something normal. Well, the problem was, Danny lives alone. The first time it happened, Danny brushed it off. She thought maybe she missed her mother. Maybe it was the sound of the pipes in her imagination, just kind of filled in the blanks. But the second time it happened, out of just muscle memory, the voice goes, Danny? And she answers back, yeah? She waited and no response. She was like, well, that was kind of weird. Kind of brushed it off, tried to move on with her day. But that's when she started to notice other things. She said footsteps was pacing the hallway at night, the sound of someone opening and closing drawers, her phone vibrating with no notification, her TV turning on and off by itself. But Danny says that the worst part of all of this was the voices. And that voice didn't just copy one person, it copied everyone she loved. She would hear her sister laughing from the kitchen, his ex calling her name, the exact way that he used to when he used to be annoyed with her. Danny says even her. Yes, once she heard her own voice whisper, come here. After hearing her own voice, that's when Danny knew that something was wrong. Mimic spirits tend to study you. Listen, they learn your patterns, your tone, even the way your loved one sounds when they're tired, angry, and scared. They use it to draw you in. At the time, Danny didn't know about this. She didn't know that answering the second time was what potentially opened the door to so many more things happening. One night, Danny woke up to the sound of her mother crying in the living room. It was like a full sob, desperate and panicked type of cry. Danny runs out of the living room without thinking, gets to the living room, looks around and notices that it's empty. But the crying did not stop. Suddenly was coming from behind her. Now, Danny says she doesn't know if this is in her head because she was terrified, but she could have sworn she heard somebody breathing behind her and felt the breathing down her neck. And as she's looking around shocked, the crying stops. Right in her ear, she hears a whisper, why didn't you help me sooner? And at that point, Danny ran in her room and locked herself in there. She didn't sleep for 2 days, and things were just getting worser and worser. I know you guys hate when I do this, but it's also Tuesday. I have to get to work in 30 minutes. 30, yes. The story is kind of long because she had to go through a whole thing. It got worse before it got better. So you're gonna have to leave a comment for part 2. I know y'all hate the part 2s, but it's Tuesday. I have work in 30 minutes, okay? It's a long story. There's no way I'm gonna sit here and do it all in one take. So I don't know. Leave a comment for part 2 and I'll be back as soon as I can.
You guys, I got another really good one for you. The story comes from one of my followers. Her name is Honey, and she tells this incredible story. She said that when she was 17 years old, she gave birth to her son, Harley. She had gone to one of her checkups, and while she was there, they actually decided that they wanted to induce her 3 weeks early due to risks involving her gestational diabetes and the fact that her amniotic fluid was low. Before I go any further, I just want to say, trigger warning, there are some disturbing occurrences regarding the baby later on in the story. So they made the appointment for later that afternoon for her to be induced, and she was really worried. I mean, she was already very young and also very concerned with this baby, of course. And her parents and her baby's father ended up going with her that night to deliver. She also said that her mother's friend met them there at the hospital to be there because she was going to be the baby's godmother. So the baby's godmother and Honey's dad waited in the visitors area while Honey, her mother, and her baby's father went into the delivery room. She had her mom and her baby's father on either side. She wanted to explain that when you get off the elevators and you go towards the delivery room, you have to pass first through a nurse's station where there were a lot of nurses working that night. And then you get to a little visitors area that are right up against where the rooms are. And she said it was a small hospital, so there were only 5 rooms, and she was the only one in any one of these rooms. So it came time to induce, and she said it went way quicker than they anticipated. And after 4 big pushes, the baby was born. She notices very quickly that she cannot hear this baby crying. She said the doctor needed to finish up what he was doing with her, so he passed the baby off to the nurses, as it was their job to clean the baby baby up and suction out any fluids. Now, all the while, nervously anticipating, still the baby does not cry. And then all of a sudden, you hear one of the nurses say, "Doctor, I need you now. The baby," and she stops and he looks up and rushes over to see what's going on. So now Honey is freaking out and asking her mom what is going on. She can also hear the doctors and nurses rushing around and almost in a little bit of a panic themselves. So now Honey's straining to sort of try to see what's going on. And she hears her mom trying to convince the baby's father to distract her when all of a sudden something crazy happened. A tall man bursts through the doors and enters the room and looks over at Honey. And she says instantly, she's not afraid anymore. She just knows everything will be fine. And then he quickly walks over to the doctor and nurses, and the doctor looks up and he's like, "What? Who are you? What are you doing here?" And he says, "I'm here to save the baby." And he scoops the baby up out of the doctor's hands, and that's when Honey gets a really good look at her son. He says he was blue and swollen and not crying or breathing. And the doctor is protesting, and the nurses are in shock because this man just swept into the room and grabbed this baby. Honey says that the man who has her son turns his back to her, and he does something, and then all of a sudden, the baby starts crying and breathing. And with that, the man walks over, hands the baby back to the doctor, who is in shock beyond belief, and then he walks over to Honey. And he lays his hand on her arm, and he leans in, and he says with a deep, beautiful, baritone voice, almost with an accent, "Everything will be fine now. Keep believing." And then he walked out of the room. So now that the baby is fine, everything can go back to order. The nurses now take the baby and they're finishing cleaning him up, and the doctor comes over and he finishes what he was doing for Honey. And she said a few moments later, she is now holding her beautiful baby boy, Harley Shane. So later on, they're getting to talk to the doctor about who the heck that man was that came in the room and saved the baby. And he is just in disbelief. He is like, "I have no idea who that was. I have never seen him here before." And the nurses, they didn't know who he was either. So then Honey's mother goes out to tell her dad. And remember, he and the mom's friend were out in that little visitors area directly outside of the delivery room. And they said that they did see a man enter, but they never saw him exit. It would have been impossible to miss somebody coming back out of that room. So then the dad goes over to the nurse's station, remember that room that kind of leads into the delivery room, and asks them where or how he can locate this man to thank them for saving the baby. And all the nurses there are very confused. They were like, nobody came through, no one entered, and no one exited. And then guys, get this, she said the weirdest part was that anybody who did see this man all describe him as looking different, as in he was different looking to each and every one of them. So the dad and the mom's friend saw him in a navy blue naval uniform with gold buttons and a gold stripe down the side of the pants. They said he was very tall, like 6'6", dark hair, and very, very short cut like an officer would wear. They said he had brown eyes and olive skin. And the baby's father said that to him, he was wearing all tan, a tan shirt, tan pants, brown belt, brown hiking boots, and hair was cut short to his ears. He said his eyes were a deeper color and he couldn't really tell, but his skin was olive. And Honey describes him as wearing all white, a white button-up shirt, white undershirt, white pants, also white shoes. She said he was about 6'6" and very good looking. He had a name tag on his shirt that said Michael, and he had an olive complexion and piercing bright green eyes. She said his hair was dark brown but wavy and kind of curly to his ears. And when he looked at her, she said she felt calmness and love and light. She says then after that, the nurses couldn't really remember him at all. And the doctor says he remembers that a man did come in the room, but he couldn't recollect what he looked like. Just that he wasn't supposed to be here and he was not a part of the hospital staff. And Honey wants to stress something. She said that before all this went down, before she even went to the initial appointment where they decided to induce early, she was really struggling with her beliefs. She said she felt really lax with her walk with God, and she was really being kind of down on herself, being so young and pregnant. She did say that she had tried talking to God, but she just kept feeling more lax and more low. So she wants to know, what do you guys think? Do you think that God sent her an angel to help her? I just absolutely love this story. It is so crazy, but awesome at the same time. I'm going to be tagging her in here, so let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. And if you're new here, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
Let's read another true and scary story. I was 14 the first time I learned that nature isn't always peaceful after dark. I went to a sleepaway camp in the Appalachian Mountains. The kind of place that is supposed to make you feel safe just because it's surrounded by trees and air. When I stayed on campgrounds, nothing ever felt wrong. I fell asleep in a bunk full of other girls to whispering and giggling, feeling comforted by the noise of people around me. Even when we were asleep, there was coughing, turning, and counselors walking past with flashlights. But the camp offered this optional trip, a backpacking trip, an overnight camping hike on the Appalachian Trail. Only 10 girls were allowed to go. I didn't know anything about the trail or the mountains or the things people don't talk about. I didn't know the history, the stories, and legends, or why people talked about that trail in hushed voices. I just thought it sounded brave and a challenge. The morning we left, we packed our food, sleeping bags, tents, special water purifiers, and anything we needed for survival. The backpack swallowed our shoulders, too heavy for us, like a warning we didn't understand yet. The counselors drove us away off camp and told us rules that didn't feel like rules, more like instructions for survival. I didn't question it because I was a kid. I always assumed adults always had reasons for rules to keep us safe. We weren't allowed to go anywhere alone, not even to pee. If we heard someone call our name, we were supposed to ignore it. We weren't supposed to look back. We weren't supposed to sing, whistle, or play music out loud. Now that I'm older, I don't understand how 10, 14-year-old girls were taken into the wilderness with only 2 counselors who were barely adults themselves. Anything could have happened. We got to the entrance to a trail on the side of a road. No buildings, no signs, just asphalt and trees. They unloaded us in our backpacks and drove away, leaving us there like it was normal. The moment we stepped into the woods, the world felt different. The air felt heavier, thicker, like it pressed against my skin. Like the forest closed behind us and erased the road. The sound of cars disappeared even though we hadn't gone far yet. It was quiet in a way that felt intentional, like the trees were listening. We started climbing up the mountain. The sun was still high, heat sitting on our backs, bugs crawling everywhere. My backpack cut into my shoulders with every step, but stopping felt worse. We walked deeper and higher up the mountain. We walked for hours. As we went deeper, things stopped making sense. A single shoe on the side of the trail. Then another shoe, different size, different color. Sunglasses, half buried in dirt. Small bags. Pieces of people without the people themselves. It didn't feel like litter. It felt like evidence of something unfinished. Sometimes we passed other hikers. Sometimes we passed staircases. Real staircases standing alone in the forest leading nowhere. No building, no ruins. Just stairs rising from the dirt. We finally reached the top of the mountain right before sunset, and the view was beautiful and in a way made me feel exposed, like I was being watched from every angle. Everything stretched out endlessly, the Berkshire Mountains stretching for miles and miles. Our campsite was close by, so after a quick snack break, we walked there. We had a buddy system, so if we needed to go somewhere, we always had someone with us. Me and my buddy Kayla set up our tent together, hands shaky from exhaustion. We cooked with the rest of the group, we ate dinner, and talked quietly by the fire. The counselors kept reminding us that we had to be inside our tents before dark, like the darkness itself was something that needed to be avoided. No one was laughing much anymore. When the lights started fading, Kayla and I zipped ourselves into our tent. The fabric felt thin, too thin. I lay on my sleeping bag on top of a small mat, the ground hard and uneven beneath me. I listened to bugs, distant animal sounds, the air warm and still. I told myself this was normal. People camp all the time. Eventually, I drifted off. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. My first thought was something is wrong. It was dead quiet. There were no more bugs, no more animals, no more wind. Like the forest stopped breathing. The silence was so complete it rang in my ears. I heard nothing but these slow footsteps. I knew it wasn't anyone from our group. I knew that immediately. If someone needed the bathroom, there would have been whispering, flashlights, more than one person. There were no flashlights, no voices, no second set of steps. It was slow, like it was looking at all of our tents like it had all the time in the world. I nudged Kayla and whispered her name. She woke up, turned to look at me, and said, "What?" too loudly. The footsteps stopped. My stomach dropped. Fear consumed my body, and my entire body went cold. "There's someone outside of the tent. Hide," I whispered, and stuck my whole head into my sleeping bag. I made myself as small as possible. I held my breath so hard my lungs burned. Kayla did the same. The footsteps came closer, so close I could hear the ground shift. It moved right up to the tent, near the clear plastic at the top. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. It felt like something was standing there, waiting, watching for movement, listening for breath. We heard its deep breathing, almost like raspy panting. It sounded terrifying. I hope whatever it was too dumb to understand that there was 2 people in the tent if we stayed still. It felt like that moment lasted forever until it finally walked away again. I didn't sleep again. I stayed awake the rest of the night, frozen, listening, staring up through the top of the tent, scared it would come back. Kayla eventually fell asleep again, but I kept watch. About an hour later, I checked the time on my iPod Touch because I needed proof that time was still moving and morning was coming. I was playing a game on the iPod to calm my mind when a scream tore through the night. It didn't sound human, but it didn't sound like an animal either. It sounded like something in pain or something calling. I don't know if that was what was standing over our tent, but it sounded like it was really close to us. Finally, the sun came up and we all packed our stuff and hiked back down the mountain. More lost shoes, more abandoned things, like the forest was collecting pieces of people. When we got back to camp, Kayla and I didn't tell anyone because they wouldn't believe us. I don't think we could have explained it even if we tried. I've never gone camping again. I'm thankful I'm still alive to tell this story. Some places just don't want you there. A part of me also feels like flesh pedestrians have been following me ever since. I come across them everywhere in my daily life. They look like people, but if you talk to them, they're not people. They don't talk normally, or they can't talk if you try to talk to them. They stare at me and their gaze will follow me like I'm their target. I live in New York City, so I see them in Times Square and at the store and everywhere I go. I can't help but feel like something is waiting for me to come back to that town or those mountains because they didn't get me the first time. One of my only thoughts was like maybe this could be some sort of like forest dwelling creature like Bigfoot, but because you said that there are flesh pedestrians following you, then I have a feeling that it was probably something similar to that. Thank you so much, Jenny, for sending this story in. This is super spooky, and I am glad that you have never gone camping again because it's probably for the best. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
Weird spooky dating stories. It's been 2 years since the portrait was done of me. Every day since when I leave the shower, I find a different message written on the mirror. I'll show the portrait at the end of this story. But basically what happened was 2 years prior, she was showering and the light started flickering in her bathroom. She didn't think much of it, but she pulled her head out of the shower so that she could change the music, and she noticed that there was like a portrait of her drawn in the mirror steam. And she said it looked exactly like her. She said before she got in the shower, she was like looking in the mirror and she feels like this ghost was like making fun of her or something for like being vain. And she says her whole family looks at that steam drawing of her and they agree that it looks just like her. So back to the story. Every day since when I leave the shower, I find a different message written on the mirror. It looks like a different language, or like it's inverted, written from the other side. I found ways to cope, like only showering with the door open so the mirror doesn't fog up, or only showering while the sun is out. But ultimately, it still happens, and I get a queasy feeling every time I step out of the shower. I researched and researched, but nothing seemed similar to my situation, other than people saying mirrors are portals, and that was about it. Every year, my very religious grandmother, who lives in Alexandria, Egypt, comes to the US to stay with my family. I decided to tell her my story, hoping to get answers, and boy, did I. Jinn are a specific type of entity in Islam and Middle Eastern culture, so there isn't much information about them in the US. There are good jinn and bad jinn. It's said that some people even have jinn as servants to clean the house and complete other tasks, which is really interesting. Can I get a jinn to clean my house? Because I'd have a lot more time to do weird spooky story time. Jinn are also said to fall in love with humans and even marry them. This is local, passed down lore, similar to how sirens exist in Haitian culture. Here's the interesting part. My grandmother's lineage traces back to the same religious believed to be in the origin of original jinn. I believe this explains much of the paranormal activity my family and I have experienced. My dad grew up in Egypt and had an experience in his childhood and that he's never spoken about. And we know better not to ask. My uncle had experiences too, all on that side of the family. Immediately, my grandmother and cousin said that there is a jinn in love with me and that the drawing was flattery. My grandmother told me I am beautiful, just like her ancestor who experienced the same thing. She said this can happen for many reasons, such as looking at yourself too often or too long, being naked, or having sexual relations in front of a mirror. And she said she was looking in front of the mirror, like checking herself out before she went into the shower. So that's crazy. My cousin then told me a story that completely freaked me out. This is a bit of a reach, so stay with me. Not too long ago, maybe 20 years, everyone there had heard of a man who in front of a mirror so often that a Jinn woman fell in love with him. Apparently, she took him to the underworld and had her babies with him. He went missing for years, but eventually came back, which is how people supposedly knew what happened. I mean, I have mirrors all over my room, even across from my bed. It's hard to avoid them. My grandmother gave me a surah to read and some rituals to follow, such as stepping into the bathroom with my left foot first and exiting with my right, never sleeping naked, and other precautions. Anyway, that's about it. I thought it was an interesting story to share, and hopefully I don't get dragged to the underworld. Here is the image that she said was written in the steam for her. That does look like a person, for sure. I kind of wish she would take pictures of like the messages that are written, even if they're not in English, even if they look like they're backwards. Like, it'd be really cool for like the rest of us to be able to try to decipher them. Okay, so I went onto this girl's page. You know, her grandmother said it's like people who are like really vain or like really into themselves or whatnot. So I went into this girl's page and I'm like, maybe this is why a Jinn is into you, girl. She sells feet pics. No hate at all. Like, girl, get your money, but who knows? Let me know in the comments if any of you have ever experienced anything like this, or if you've experienced a Jinn specifically. Send it my way.
Let's read some creepy stories that were sent to us. I used to live in this house when I was 13. It had 2 floors and an attic. My room used to face my brother's room, and my parents' room was downstairs. When we first moved in the new house, we knew about the attic but never went in it. But with my luck, the attic door was right above my room and my brother's. I remember one night, it was around 2:20 a.m., and I was awake, trying to fall asleep, until I heard footsteps above me. Loud, heavy footsteps. I went to my parents' room and told them, and my father eventually searched the attic the next day, but there was nothing. Not a rodent, not a cat, not a person, just old furniture and dust. The next night, my brother heard the same heavy footsteps above him. We were really scared because we heard them for about a week. These footsteps only began at night or when we were home alone, but every time the attic was searched, there was nothing. We eventually moved out, but as we were in the car driving away, I remember looking at the attic window and seeing a dark, slender figure. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it, and I still wonder what that thing was. This was around 2 years ago, back when I lived in a really quiet area where everyone knew each other and nothing ever really happened out of the ordinary. And to get anywhere like shops, work, or even the main road, you had to drive past a local forest. I'd driven past it hundreds of times and it never felt creepy, just trees with a road next to it. That day, it was around 4 p.m. I'd been busy all day and realized I hadn't taken my dog out yet. So I grabbed her lead and we walked into the forest. As we always did, I let her off her lead. Just normal routine. We didn't go far as we never really did. It was normal at first, but I grew concerned and started feeling really on edge. It was really quiet for some reason. There was no sounds of birds or even neighbors. I was about to call my dog back to the lead to go home when I realized she was just staring, not sniffing, just staring into the trees. I was so creeped out by it, and it took around 5 calls for her to even come back to me. I then rushed home, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone. It looked human, but way too skinny and tall. It was so weird, and I was so scared. Nothing really ever happened to me after that, but it still scares me. What could have happened, and what was it? One time in 2020, when I was having a sleepover with my friend, we slept in a terrace with windows almost all around it. The terrace was located a few meters away from her house, so we were safe, or at least we thought we were. It was about 10 p.m. and we thought we should get some sleep, so we closed the curtains and went under the covers. We fell asleep, but we both woke up to a sound. The sound was coming from the field next to us. It was like some sort of howling, but it had that bloody feeling in it and sounded like it was yelling through a long pipe. We of course got really scared and were afraid to go back to sleep. We had our phones with us, so my friend called her parents in the middle of the night and they told us to check outside the window, so we did. We saw this tall, gray, weird-looking thing standing on all fours. We called her parents again and told them what we saw, and her mother told us to run inside quick, but we were too scared, so she came and got us. We ran inside with her and slept in their room that night. Ever since that night, when I visit my friend, we talk about that night, but we have never seen that thing again. One night, I was sleeping with my parents, and at 2 a.m., I woke up because I felt like something was grabbing my feet, but there was nothing there. As I looked closer, I saw a black figure at the end of the bed, exactly where my feet were. I screamed so loud that my parents jolted out of bed. My mom screamed because she also saw the figure. My dad is very religious, so he always has a rosary and holy water on the bedside table, so he tried to chant prayers while holding me and my mom close. Then the figure opened its mouth, and my dad splashed holy water on it, and it just disappeared. After that, we packed our bags and went to my grandparents' house, so I was finally able to sleep. I'd have to burn the house down, honey. Burn it. Burn it.
People don't know about the land between the lakes. Now, the land between the lakes is this area on the border of Kentucky and Tennessee. And basically, at the time, there were two rivers that formed this piece of land in between. And apparently in the 60s, 70s sometime, they dammed it off and created what is now Lake Kentucky and Barkley Lake. And in between is this stretch of land that's become like this tourist destination where millions of people go every year to camp. Now, there are so many different legends and lore because apparently when they had dammed the lakes, they flooded entire towns, and some of these towns had cemeteries, and so a lot of these cemeteries are completely underwater, under the lake. And also, if you hike in this area where the land is, there are over like 270 cemeteries. Now, this is a story I heard out of the Land of the Lakes and how creepy this place is. So this guy said that him and his family went down for the 4th of July to stay at this cabin right next to Lake Kentucky. And he said, it was about midday. Him and his family were all outside right next to the lake. His sons were fishing, and he was just sitting there grilling out. Well, he said all of a sudden he hears a man's voice yelling, "Help me." And he said it sounded like it was coming from like the lake. And he's looking around, he doesn't see anyone, but he can vividly hear, like, "Help me, help me, help me." And so he gets his wife and he's like, "Do you hear that?" And she hears it. And they can't figure out like where this is coming from. And he's like, "Well, there's a bunch of people here, for 4th of July. Maybe it's someone camping nearby." So eventually, after they keep hearing this, he calls the sheriff. Sheriff comes out. He hears it. And he's confused because he's like, it's coming from the lake, but where is it coming from? Like, who is out there saying, "Help me"? So he goes around and, goes to different campsites and cabins. No one is like, "Yeah, we're not yelling for help. Like, we don't need help." And he seems like very confused and stuff. Later that night, they're all in their cabin sleeping. And he said sometime in the middle of the night, they start hearing a banging at the door. And someone's like banging frantically at the front door of this cabin. And he said he could hear that same man's voice, and it was like yelling, "Help me, help me." So he's like, hold on, like, I'm coming. He runs to the front door of the cabin. He opens it up, and he said it was just completely quiet outside. There was no one. And he said later on he talked to some locals, and they said, yeah, and like this stuff happens all the time. There have been, hundreds of people who drowned in this lake. And he said like every year so many people drown or they disappear and they're never seen from again. One of the other legends about this area is something they call the LBL beast, or the beast of the land between the lakes. And this thing is similar to the Dogman up in Michigan, right? And apparently in the 80s there was a whole family that was like massacred, and they tried to cover it up and stuff. Soldiers came from Fort Campbell, and a lot of people in the area, they say, yeah, they're like, there is something in these woods, we don't go out at night. So this is another story I heard about this man and his family. They go out camping in this area, and they actually stayed in a cabin, and I believe it was near Lake Kentucky. And he said, at night they decided to go for like a nice hike because it was really nice outside. So they started hiking down this trail, and they stumbled upon like a really old cemetery. And he said during the day they had seen it, but now at night it looked really creepy because it was kind of illuminated by the moonlight. And he said all of a sudden they seen something like moving by one of the stones. And he said that's when he noticed there was like dirt sort of flying up in the air. And he said as they got a little closer, there was something digging out like one of these graves. And he said all of a sudden this thing just stood up out of the hole. And he said it looked like a man, but a dog. And it had these bright red eyes. And apparently, he said it let off this loud howl. And so he said him and his family, they took off running as fast as they can. They get back to the cabin and they lock the doors. And he said all night long they could hear this thing running around the house, making howls, like going up on the porch, tapping on the window. And they said whatever it was stalked them all night. And the next morning they packed up and left. So what do you think? Have you heard any stories from the land of the lakes?
I got an email from somebody who said that a while ago their parents went on a camping trip with a group of people and they ran into something that would ultimately end up taking the lives of one of them. The story is crazy. I have to give a trigger warning. So in 2003, Sam had just gotten his driver's license and his parents had gotten him a car and he wanted to go on a trip with his car. So Sam is a triplet with a brother and a sister. So his brother, his sister, his girlfriend, and his two friends all decided that they wanted to go on a week-long camping trip. They're looking around, they find this really cheap cabin in like the middle of nowhere. And the guy who they rented the cabin from said that his mom had actually passed away in the house and told them that it was haunted. The owner of the cabin actually told him that this is why he gave him the cabin so cheap. But as the owner of the cabin is walking out of the cabin after he kind of shows them around, the owner mumbles something that only the sister hears. And he says something about running into them. The sister kind of just ignores this little comment. And the first day that they're there, everything goes normal. They have a campfire, they eat s'mores, they eat so many s'mores, they get sick, they're having a lot of fun. But when night rolled around, the trip took a bit of a turn. Everybody goes to sleep and Sam is sleeping and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he hears an elk screaming. And if you have ever heard an elk scream before, it is a pretty terrifying sound. This is what it sounds like. So he gets up and he looks outside the window and the window is pretty well lit. He sees a bull and 4 cow elks just grazing and walking around calmly. So he's just watching them, wondering where the hell that sound came from, when suddenly he sees every single one of their heads just dart to the left. And they're looking into the woods and then they just start pacing nervously. Then they start stomping their feet and they start making warning sounds. And Sam looks into the woods and he starts seeing this small orange light appear from the woods. And just as soon as he sees this light, he sees all of the animals just running away. They just booked it. Something really scared them. So he's just looking into the woods and he sees the orange light come out and then he sees something appear out of the woods, but he can't really tell what it is. So he just assumes that this is a grizzly bear because the owner of the cabin had told him that there were grizzly bears around the area. So he decides that he's just going to go back to bed. So he goes back to bed. The next day they wake up, they go outside and they see something really weird. They see their campfire that they had used. They see more burnt logs, but they're put in like a formation that they didn't leave it in. So they think this is really weird, but they're like, maybe we just didn't put the fire out well enough. They don't really put much thought into this. They kind of just joke around about it. And around 9 p.m., for some reason, they decide that they're going to go on a walk in the woods. So as they're walking into the woods, they see something. They see an owl, and there's something wrong with this owl. It can fly normally. Everything's fine with the way that it's moving, but it had burnt wings and it looked injured. But there's something weird about this wound. It looks kind of like a symbol. So they're like, okay, well, I mean, it could be a coincidence. You know, injuries can look weird sometimes. So they continue walking and then they see a raccoon that is no longer with us, just laying there, and it also has the same symbol on it. They're looking at this raccoon like, what the hell is going on in these woods? When suddenly they hear this screaming sound, and it is like loud, and it's a man screaming, and then it stops, and it's followed by this bizarre sound that they couldn't really make out what it was. So at this point, they're scared. So they instantly run back to the cabin, and they're kind of talking to each other, and they're like, maybe we should just leave. Maybe this is not worth staying here. But then they're like, you know what? We paid for the week. We wanted to be here. This is supposed to be a fun trip. Like, let's just ignore everything that's happened. Let's stay. Huge mistake. Well, the next day they decide that they're going to grill burgers. So they go outside and his brother, Sam's brother and sister, are grilling the burgers. And Sam and his two friends are on the porch and they're just chilling when suddenly they hear something. Sounds like 5 human voices are just shouting. They all just freeze and they start hearing this cackling sound, like a man is literally cackling, not a normal laugh, like a cackle. He said that whoever was laughing sounded like they were hysterical. They're all terrified at this point and they're like, let's go in the house. So they all run into the house. But at that point, his sister is like, listen, we forgot to turn off the grill. And she's like, someone has to go outside and turn off the grill. And everybody's like, I'm not going out there. There's no way I'm going out there. So she's like, fine, I'll do it. So she decides that she's going to go outside and turn off the grill. So she goes outside, she turns off the grill or whatever she's doing. 15 minutes pass. She does not come back inside. So at this point, they decide they have to go outside and look for her. She's gone. No signs of her anywhere. She is gone. They looked for her all night long. They are searching everywhere. They cannot find her deep into the night. Till 7 a.m. They finally found her. She's covered in scratches and bruises. She has no idea what has happened to her. All she could say is that she just remembered running from something. That was the only thing that she remembered. Everything else blank. So they, for some reason, decide that they're going to stay one more night and then they're going to leave. And this again ended up being a huge mistake. Now, the sister was really sick. She was in bad shape. Like, she could not eat at all. She could not leave her bed. And they're just trying to take care of her, and they're just trying to kind of relax. But they keep hearing this shuffling sound coming from outside. And this is really irritating them. They have no idea what this is. So I'm going to give a big trigger warning for this next part, because this part is bad. So they decide that they're going to go outside for some reason, and they go outside and they see these people in black cloaks. Okay, I got to figure out some way to tell you guys this. Okay, they were burning what they heard screaming the night before, they're assuming, because they were burning the same type of thing that was screaming the night before, literally right in front of their eyes, but they're not sure if it's the same individual. And it had the same symbol on it as the animals did. It's right in front of them. And beside what they were burning was two more that they were getting ready to burn. So they are standing there in utter disbelief at what is happening, when one of the people in the cloaks turns and looks at them and then screams, "Look!" And someone picks up a very long, sharp object and starts running towards them. All the people in the cloaks start running towards them. They ran as fast as they could. They get inside of the house, and when they get inside of the house, they're locking all the doors, and they begin trying to break the doors down. And then they set the house on fire. They're in the basement at this point, terrified. And his brother went to go grab their sister and all of her things, and goes down in the basement, and they're wondering what the hell they're gonna do, because the house is literally on fire and they have to get out of there, when one of them notices that there's a door in the basement to get outside. So they all run outside of that door, and they're running towards the car when the people see them and they start chasing them. They catch up to them right as they get into the car door. They slam the car door shut, and these people are trying to smash down the windows, and they can't obviously do it. Everyone got in the car safely, and they all leave. The whole time these people are doing all of these things, they said that they were screeching like animals. Well, they all get home safely, but whatever happened to his sister in those woods, she only got progressively worse and ended up not making it eventually 5 months later. Unfortunately, Sam does blame himself for what happened to his sister, which is unfortunate because it's obviously not his fault. This is the story that I asked you guys yesterday if you wanted me to tell it, and you said that you did. Although this doesn't seem very paranormal, sometimes people are scarier than the paranormal, a lot of times. And I do feel like this is a little bit tied to the paranormal, because what do these type of people do, right? They worship. So all those symbols, all that stuff, like, what happened to his sister is my question. Did what happened to her happen because of physical injuries, or was it something else? That is the question that I have. You guys have any questions? Because I know this story is insane, but I'm wondering what you guys think of this story and what your questions. Drop them all below. Drop your comments, opinions, suggestions in the comments below. But as always, please be respectful, especially with stories like this.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity, featuring my necklace. Cute initial necklace, perfect for Valentine's Day. Will it be here by Valentine's Day if you were to order it today? Probably not. But if you're waiting to buy something last minute for Valentine's Day anyway, you might as well wait. You're gonna get yelled at anyway, you know? Now on to the story. We had to leave our house for several hours due to complex exterminating the whole road. We decided to take our dog to walk some trails. These are popular trails, so we saw a lot of people. I kept my pup on the leash for that reason. After almost 8 hours, that's a fucking long ass time. She was having a blast and I didn't want to end her fun. We finally took her home. She liked sleeping in one of the 2 closets in my room. Her closet first door remained open while the other stayed shut. After we got home, I noticed she went to her closet one time, then quickly left. Oh no! She would circle back, but not go in. When I investigated, I found a bundle of random wood stuff that looked like it was woven together. That's never a fucking good thing. Some witch shit if I ever heard it. We wiped pups down / checked for ticks prior to letting her in the house. We would have seen this on her. My daughter threw it away, and the day after, I heard scratching and tapping on my bedroom walls. After the exterminator was there? So you know you're fucked, right? By the end of the week, I heard something climbing on the walls. It would start on the wall near the second closet and crawl towards my bed. Now, I say heard because I wasn't opening my eyes to confirm if anything was there or not. See, you're smart. It started tapping on the second closet during the day. I guess it got tired of being ignored, because 2 weeks after the weird bundle, it pounded on the second closet door around midnight. Me and Pup noped out of the room. See, now the problem was I would have noped the fuck out of that room long before this. Like 2 fucking weeks ago, when we found the scary witch woodsy bundle. I told my oldest daughter and she wanted to investigate. She went in and the door was hit so hard it rattled and I heard it in the hallway. It sounded like something was trying to break the door down. When she ran out, I just looked at her and said, "And that's why we don't investigate. Some people just have to learn the hard way. Not me. My son and youngest daughter were woken up by all the commotion. My son just said, your room, your problem. And my youngest said, I want nothing to do with this. Smart kids. She did take pups with her when she went back to bed. Quick Google search told us what to do. Oil burner ran constantly and I cracked a window. I guess we weren't worth the effort because I never heard it again after that. Or what you did worked. And it was like, you know what? Fuck this. I now have a witch's ball hanging in my house to stop anything from entering, and I threw away the welcome mat too. Because hoes, you are not welcome. To include ghost hoes and demon hoes alike. I don't want anything getting the wrong idea. Good for you. So that's a big fuck no if I ever heard one. Rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being really scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. Tomorrow is my birthday. My favorite number twice. 33. Happy birthday to all my birthday twins. I will see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
Hi, Daisy. My daughter loves watching your videos and has even gotten me into watching them with her. She asked me plenty of times to share my story, so here it is. During my time in the U.S. Navy, I spent years assigned to the USS Nimitz. After a while, ship life becomes routine, especially on an aircraft carrier. The noise, the vibrations, the feeling that the walls are always moving. You stop noticing it. You learn how to sleep anywhere, under anything, through almost anything. I was an officer, and my schedule meant sleep usually came late and in fragments. That night, we were underway. No coastline, no city lights, no reference point. Just open ocean in every direction. When a carrier is moving like that, the ship feels sealed off from the rest of the world, like nothing exists beyond the steel around you. I climbed into my rack, which is basically a narrow bunk built into the wall, just wide enough to lie down and pull a curtain closed. The lights were dimmed, the air was cold, and the ship hummed steadily beneath me. I lay on my side, facing outward, with my inside shoulder pressed against the wall. There was solid metal behind me and no space at all. I drifted into that half-awake state where your body is asleep but your mind never fully shuts off. That's when something tapped my shoulder. It was heavy and deliberate, not accidental, and it was on the inside shoulder, the one pressed against the wall. Before I could react, a voice spoke quietly but heavy right next to my ear. Hello. It sounded like a groan, not normal. My first thought was that someone was messing with me or needed something. Ensigns would sometimes pull small pranks on each other, especially late at night, but that explanation made less sense the more I thought about it. How could they tap my shoulder from inside the bunk? I pulled the curtain open and leaned out, but the passageway was dark. I reached for the nearby light switch. It cycled through different lighting with each movement. I flipped it once and the white light came on, but it felt too bright. I didn't want to disturb the other ensigns sleeping nearby, including the one who had been asleep only moments before. So I flipped it again, until the red light came on instead. The passageway filled with a dim red glow.
Spooky stories with evidence. This one would definitely make you not want to travel at nighttime. So apparently this happened in a rural road in Mexico. This happened in a rural road in Mexico. This guy took a picture of his truck because he swore that he saw something moving on top. The reason that he got out of his truck was because he really did think it was another person messing with him, but when he got out, he could have sworn that he saw a shadow, what looked like a human but with wings. After seeing that shadow, he doesn't see anybody around him or on top of the truck or anything like that. However, after taking this picture and deciding that he's gonna go back into his truck, he says that the passenger side door was open and that the seat almost looked like there was somebody sitting there. After this happened to him, he obviously went around showing people the pictures, and a lot of people who live around there says that there is this urban legend that people claim that they don't follow you on the road. They wait for you on top of your car. I don't even want to know anything further. No, thank you. No. This is the picture that he captured that night. I don't know what the fuck I would do if I saw that. Like, if I took a picture and then I'm like, oh fuck, How am I gonna get back in my truck? I'd be so scared. This is just a closer look. It definitely looked like it has wings. It's very much giving Jeepers Creepers a little bit. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.
I looked down the corridor in both directions. There was no one there. That's when I checked the time. It was well past midnight. Still trying to be rational, I decided to do a full check. I wanted to be sure no one was hiding or trying to mess with me. I stepped out and walked farther down the passageway into what we called officer country, where most of the racks were. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. At the far end of the passageway, cast against the red lighting, was the shadow of a man. He was standing still, facing slightly away from me. What caught my attention immediately was what he was wearing. He looked like he was dressed in old Navy service dungarees, the kind worn decades ago, maybe in the 1970s or 1980s. During my time in the Navy, those uniforms were no longer in use. We wore NWU type ones, what we called blueberries, and even those were being phased out. The shadow didn't move. I froze, staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I told myself it had to be someone playing a joke, someone wearing a costume or old gear for a laugh. But the longer I looked, the less sense that made. Then the shadow was gone. Not walking away, not turning a corner, just gone. I stood there for a long time, listening, waiting for footsteps or laughter, or anything that would explain it. There was nothing. Just the hum of the ship and the quiet breathing of people asleep behind their curtains. Eventually, I went back to my rack. I did not sleep after that. The next morning, I asked casually if anyone had been moving through the area during the night or pulling pranks. No one had. No one admitted to anything. No one had seen anyone in old uniforms. I didn't bring it up again for fear of being questioned. Even now, years later, retired and far from the ocean, I still think about how the voice sounded. I never forgot it. How close it was. Like it knew I would try to explain it away. Like it knew exactly where I was lying.
Unsettling Uber ride. About a week ago, I was at a store and ordered an Uber to take me back to my mum's house. The ride's about 30 to 45 minutes, and although there are some rural areas in between, I can think of several different ways to make the ride. All on main, well-trafficked roads. I've made the drive myself many times. I'm 27, I'm a woman, and the driver was probably, 50 to 60 years old, a guy. He was very nice and he was talkative, asking what I do for work, where I'm going, what I'm doing for the holidays, etc. After about 10 minutes, I put my headphones in, and that ends the conversation. I do notice he's going a different way than I normally do. After about another 10 minutes, I notice that we're driving on an extremely rural, long road. I pull it up on the Uber map, and it's off route. We're still driving on this one-way road for like 3 minutes. There's a couple of houses, no cars, some horses, definitely no people. At this point, I'm sitting up, more alert.
Oh no.
I've taken my headphones out. He's not saying anything. I'm watching us drive down this little paved road on the map, and I notice that up ahead, it appears to be a dead end. At this point, I'm getting nervous. But I'm hoping that he'll come to the dead end, turn around, we can get back en route. So, at the end of this road, he makes a right into what appears to be a dirt driveway. So I'm like, why are we pulling in here?
That's terrifying.
And he makes some excuse about how his GPS routed him this way. I say, I really don't like this. Can we get back onto the main road? And he says, oh yeah, the main road's just up here. And he continues driving down this dirt road behind people's houses into the woods. It's literally an ATV trail, and he's driving between trees in his sedan. At this point, I was literally about to just jump out the car. I was so scared.
That's horrific.
I also had my phone in my hand about to call someone, and he's literally not saying anything. Just driving, with his hands on the wheel, not looking back at me. Just driving like he's been on this little dirt path 100 times. And I know he has been, because this was not even a road that showed up on my map, and it was behind the houses in the woods. You'd only know this was here if you've been there before. So he keeps driving, and I keep telling him we need to get back on the road, and he just keeps saying we will. After probably a full 3 minutes of driving in the woods, he takes a turn on the trail, and it takes us back onto a paved road. A little further down, another turn. Now we're back on a real road with other cars, and I suddenly feel a bit safer. Then he starts laughing and being like, I'm so surprised the GPS took me that way. They ought to change that. That was so strange. That seemed like a private road. I don't believe a word he's saying. He purposefully took that trail.
Oh.
Because if he didn't already know it was there, he would assume it was a driveway and not turn into it like I assumed. And that leaves me wondering what his intentions were. I still had another 15 minutes or so in that car with this guy, and I literally sat with my hand on the door handle the whole time. He tried to talk to me a few more times after that, but I wanted no part of the ride anymore. I know for a fact his GPS did not take him that way, because my GPS didn't even register it as a road. My only hope is that he figured he would just use that as a shortcut, although it made the trip longer, and overlooked how creepy the whole situation came off. What do you think? Has anyone else thought they were going to be kidnapped while in an Uber?
Oh, gosh.
On September 22nd, 2006, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddard was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle. Cassie was very responsible, and so her aunt and uncle didn't just trust her to house-sit, they also regularly asked her to babysit their son. During this particular house-sitting weekend, Cassie had invited her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, over to the residence to watch a movie with her. She had also invited two other friends named Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, who were classmates of her and Matt's. And so while the four teens are watching this movie, Brian and Tori kind of awkwardly stand up and announce to the other two that they don't want to watch a movie on the TV, they want to go watch a movie in the movie theater, and they promptly leave. Cassie and Matt thought it was a little bit odd that they would come over here specifically to watch a movie with them, only to say, we don't want to watch a movie with you guys, we want to watch it in the theater, but they didn't think much of it and they stayed to finish the movie. Unbeknownst to Cassie and Matt, when Brian and Tori left, they actually looped around to the back of the residence and unlocked the basement door so they could quietly re-enter later. Because these boys had been planning to do something absolutely horrible to Cassie, and they planned on doing it that night. Brian and Tori idolized serial killers. When Brian and Tori happened to watch the movie Scream together, which is a popular horror movie where this masked villain sneaks into teenagers' homes and terrorizes them, they decided that that would be the way they gained infamy. They would reenact the murder scenes from the movie Scream, but in real life. Shortly after this revelation, they begin filming themselves as they come up with their big plan of how they're going to break into someone's home and what they're going to do to them. And at some point on camera, they would say that they've identified their first victim, and it's going to be Cassie Jo Stoddard. They just needed to wait for a time when she was going to be alone. And when they found out she was going to be house sitting over that weekend in September for her aunt and uncle, they put their plan into motion. But when they showed up and Matt Beckham was there, Cassie's boyfriend, it kind of screwed up their plan. And so that's why Brian and Tori had stood up and said they were going to go watch a movie at the movie theater, because what they really wanted to do was come back later when Matt wasn't there anymore so they could attack Cassie. So Brian and Tori leave, and they do go to the movie theater, and they do buy tickets because they figure this is a great opportunity to create a solid alibi for themselves. But they don't stick around for the movie. They get back in their car, and they drive around and film themselves excitedly talking about how great it's going to be when Cassie's all alone and they can attack her. After a couple of hours of driving around, they can't wait any longer, and they figure that Matt must be gone by now. They park at the end of the street, they get out, they put on their masks and their gloves, and they sneak around to the side of the house where there was that open door that Brian had left. They open it up and then go inside of the residence where Cassie was, and they can hear upstairs that Matt is still there. Brian and Tori at this point felt so committed that they just said, you know what, we're gonna have to kill Matt too. So straight out of a horror movie, Brian and Tori hide in the basement wearing their mask and their gloves, they've got their knives, and they start making all this noise to try to get Cassie and Matt to come downstairs to see what's making all the sound. But it doesn't work. They don't come downstairs. So the next thing they do is they go to the circuit breakers and they cut the power to the house, hoping that Matt and Cassie will come downstairs to try to turn it back on. But again, Matt and Cassie stay upstairs. And so Brian and Tori turn the power back on and just continue to make sounds in the the basement in hopes that Matt or Cassie or hopefully both would come downstairs so they could live out this fantasy. Meanwhile, upstairs, Matt and Cassie hadn't heard any of the sounds going on in the basement, but when the power went out, Cassie got really frightened and she asked Matt would he please stay with her overnight, and so Matt calls his mom and asks if that would be okay, and she says no, but you can invite Cassie over to our house and she can stay with us, and then tomorrow morning I'd be happy to drive her back to her aunt and uncle's house. But at the time the offer was made, the lights had come back on and Cassie had kind of calmed down and said, you know what, Matt, I'm actually just fine. I'm going to stay here. At approximately 10:30 p.m. that night, Brian and Tori could hear Matt's mom showing up, picking him up, and taking him home. And they were fairly certain that Cassie was alone, but they were going to wait for a couple minutes to make sure she really was. As they were waiting, Matt actually called Tori and said, hey, I just left Cassie's house. Can I come meet up with you guys? And Matt would later tell police that he couldn't really understand what Tori was saying. It was like he was whispering. And so Matt assumed that he must still be in the movie theater watching the movie. And Matt kind of gave up on the idea of meeting up with them and ultimately just hung up. And so after Tori got off the phone with Matt, he turned to Brian and said, she's alone. Matt just said so. Brian and Tori turned the power off once again and then walked up the stairs and slammed a closet door in hopes that it would entice her to come into the basement. But it didn't work because Cassie was horrified. She heard the slamming door, the lights are out, and she's all alone, and so she's huddled up on the couch, terrified. So Brian and Tori, frustrated they can't live out their fantasy exactly the way they wanted to by attacking her in the basement, so they go upstairs, walk into the living room where Cassie is huddled on the couch, fearing for her life, and they proceed to stab their friend to death. After the murder, Brian and Tori ran from the house, got in their car, and the first thing they did is they fired up their video camera and they filmed their excited reaction to ending Cassie's life. Brian and Tori believed they had a solid alibi because they had those movie tickets, but after Cassie's body was discovered just a couple of days later, the police immediately went to Matt Beckham, her boyfriend, and started questioning him, and he immediately said, well, Brian and Tori were the only other two people that were with us that night. The police go to Brian and Tori, and under intense questioning, Brian and Tori would confess to what they had done. They were convicted and given life sentences without the opportunity for parole. Here is some of the video footage that was found on their camera.
We found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices. Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddard. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get? We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I locked the back doors, so it's all locked. Now we just gotta wait. I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie.
In July of 2016, a woman living in Chicago, Illinois named Jordan Baranskis opened her eyes and realized she had fallen asleep on the couch the night before. She looked up and the TV was still on, and then she looked down at the other section of the couch and her boyfriend Matt was also asleep on the couch. As much as she wanted to keep sleeping alongside her boyfriend, she had work that day, so she stood up, turned the TV off, and made her way upstairs to get ready. As soon as she got upstairs, the first thing she did is go into her bedroom and get her purse that she left on the foot of her bed. But when she got in the room, her purse wasn't there. So she leaves her bedroom and she starts searching all the rooms upstairs and she can't find her purse. And she's thinking to herself, I'm certain I had it the night before. I remember rifling through my purse before going downstairs and starting to fold laundry before ultimately falling asleep on the couch. So after spending about 15 minutes looking for the purse unsuccessfully, and now she's starting to stress because she's going to be late for work because she can't find her purse, she goes downstairs and she wakes Matt up and says, hey, I gotta find my purse. I thought I left it upstairs. Apparently I didn't. Can you help me look for it? Matt rolls over. He doesn't really want to get up because he's pretty tired and he doesn't have work, so he doesn't want to wake up right now. And he says, well, are you sure you didn't leave it at the restaurant last night? I mean, if you already looked, it's probably not here. You want to just give him a call and see if you left it there? Jordan was immediately really annoyed by his reaction because she just wanted him to stand up and help her look for the purse because she had work and he could just go back to sleep. And so it started this argument between the two of them where Matt just wanted her to call the restaurant because he was convinced she had it there. And Jordan was like, no, I know I had my purse. I'm positive I had it last night before I fell asleep on on the couch with you. So their argument begins to escalate a little bit, and that's when Jordan remembers that they had recently installed a Nest camera downstairs to monitor their dogs whenever they were gone. And she thought, we can just look at the footage on the Nest camera, we can see me walking into the apartment, and I will either have or not have my purse in my hand. And so Jordan opens up her app and she calls Matt over, and they go back to the night before, right before they left for the restaurant. She's got her purse in hand, they leave the front door, and then several hours go by and they come back in, and very clearly Jordan has her purse in her hand. And Jordan turns to Matt and says, told you so. And Matt's like, okay, fine, let me help you look. And as they're about to put the app down, she realizes on the Nest camera timeline that motion was detected at 3:30 in the morning when they were both clearly asleep on the couch. And so she calls Matt back over and says, here, look, there's motion detected at 3:30 in the morning. And they hit play. After the couple had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV on, a hooded figure emerges from their upstairs hallway and stands at the top of the stairs and just watches the two of them sleep. Before he left, he stole her purse along with a couple of other things from their apartment. And somehow this guy has never been caught, and he's been given the nickname Creeper Ghost. On April 9th, 2015, residents of the tiny farming community Fairdale, Illinois, woke up to heavy rains outside and an ominous forecast. Severe thunderstorms were going to persist all day, and then at night there was a chance of a tornado. Meteorologists were telling residents of Fairdale that if you can, you should evacuate because it's not worth sticking around for. But if you're going to ride out the storm, make sure you've taken the necessary precautions and make sure you have a plan for how to get to a shelter if the storm gets really bad. That morning, some forecasters were saying this tornado could prove to be one of the biggest in Illinois' history. But most of the 152 Fairdale residents had lived here their whole lives, and they'd seen bad storms before, even tornadoes, and they had ridden them out before. How could this one be any different? You know, most of the time, the worst that happened was maybe a power line comes down and you lose power for the day. But unlike previous storms, this one was getting worse and worse by the minute, and by 6 p.m. that night, forecasters were no longer theorizing that this could be a huge tornado. They were outright pleading with Fairdale residents to evacuate while you still can. But despite these warnings, the vast majority of Fairdale residents stayed put. They were committed to riding the storm out. By 7 p.m., meteorologists were saying this tornado is imminent, and it looks as big or bigger than the last major tornado that came through Illinois that killed 8 people and leveled an entire town. This tornado tonight is going to kill people. Just 15 minutes later at 7:15, the tornado finally touched down right outside of Fairdale. It was this massive, almost mile-wide tornado with over 200-mile-an-hour winds, and unlike other tornadoes of that size that typically move at about 30 miles an hour, this one was traveling on land at about 15 miles an hour, meaning it would be sitting over the areas it was devastating for longer amounts of time, making it even worse than some of the worst predictions that meteorologists had for this tornado. 15 minutes later at 7:30 p.m., 84-year-old Fairdale resident Clem Schultz and his wife Jerry Schultz, they were at home because they had decided to ride out the storm. As Clem is sitting in the living room watching the Weather Channel, kind of waiting for the last possible second to go into their basement, he hears his wife yell out from the kitchen to come in here and look at this. So Clem goes into the kitchen and she's pointing out the back window, and he looks out and he sees this massive tornado coming right at them. It's less than a mile away, and it is way bigger than he thought it was going to be. But from their perspective, because the tornado was spinning counterclockwise, it kind of looked like it was spinning away from town into this empty field. And Clem says to his wife Jerry, you know what, it looks like it's going to miss us, but we're probably going to lose power, so I'm going to go up into the attic and get some lanterns ready. So Jerry stays in the kitchen, Clem goes up into the attic, and as he's fishing to get out the lanterns, he hears what sounds like a freight train barreling through town, and he had this little window at the edge of his attic, so he goes over and he looks out, and the tornado had not veered off into the open field. It had continued straight towards his house, and it was ripping off roofs right in front of him. And he figured, I don't have enough time to go down into the basement. I have no time to do anything. So he takes out his phone and he begins recording. Clem's house, along with all the others in that video, collapsed. And initially, Clem thought he had died because it went totally quiet and it was totally dark. And he actually said out loud, "Am I dead?" But it was the pain in his back from a crushed vertebrae that told him, "No, you survived." And he begins to kind of pull himself out of the rubble, and before long, a neighbor is pulling him out. And as soon as he's out of the rubble of his house, he looks around and his whole community is pretty much gone. And as he's standing there kind of bewildered, his neighbor says, "Clem, don't look down." And Clem says, "Why?" And his neighbor says, "Because your wife is under you and she's dead." When the dust had finally settled, not only had Clem's wife been killed, but Clem's neighbor had been killed as well, because the tornado went directly through their two houses. That video that Clem shot is now used to educate people on how dangerous tornadoes really are, and how anytime a tornado is coming through your area, never go outside to film it, seek shelter. On Sunday, February 12th, 2017, Abigail Williams was over her best friend, Liberty German's house for a sleepover. Abby and Libby were 13 and 14 respectively. That night, as they're laying in bed, they were looking out the window hoping they saw snowflakes come down, because there was apparently this huge storm that was going to roll through the next day, and they were hoping that if it did, school would be canceled the next day. But when they woke up the next morning, it hadn't even snowed. However, they found out that in Delphi, Indiana, where they lived, school had been canceled preemptively in anticipation of this big storm that never really amounted to anything. So the girls got a free day off where they could actually go outside and enjoy it. So the girls start talking about how they're going to spend their extra day off, and Libby suggests, well, why don't we go check out the Monon High Bridge? It was this abandoned bridge that crossed over the stream, and a lot of their classmates would take pictures on it and post it to their social media, and the girls figured this is a great day to go do that. So Libby asks her grandmother, Becky, who was her primary caretaker, if it would be okay if they went for a hike over near this bridge. Becky gives them permission, but with the caveat that they would find their own ride there and back. So Libby convinces her older sister Kelsey to give them a ride there, and Libby speaks to her father, Derek, and he says he can pick them up, but he'd only be able to pick them up at a very specific time, which would only give the girls a couple of hours at the bridge, but they thought that was fine and that was plenty of time. So a couple hours later, at about 1:30 in the afternoon, Kelsey drops off the two girls at the start of the trail that's going to bring them to this bridge. We know the girls made it to the bridge because at 2:07 p.m., Libby posted a picture to her social media of Abby walking across the bridge. At 3:11 p.m., Libby's father, Derek, texted her and said, "Hey, I'm going to be there in a minute. Just want to make sure you guys are there to meet me." And she didn't text Derek back, and Derek would later say that that was pretty unusual for her. At 3:14 p.m., Derek arrives at the meeting spot, and the girls are nowhere to be found. And so Derek tries calling. There's no answer. He texts his daughter, no response. And so he ends up calling Becky, Libby's grandmother, his mother, and says, "Hey, did the girls contact you and change plans about where I was picking them up or when?" And Becky said, "No, I haven't heard from them. They said they'd be there at 3. They should be there now. I haven't heard from them." And Derek says he can't get in touch with them. So for the next 10 minutes, Becky and her husband, Mike, Libby's grandfather, just try calling over and over and over again to the girls, but nothing's going through. They can't get them to respond to text messages. So Mike leaves and meets up with Derek in the parking lot, and the two of them begin walking the trail to try to find these girls. At this point, the family's not suspecting foul play. They're thinking, the girls probably got lost, or they lost track of time, or their phones just ran out of batteries, or maybe they did get hurt and they can't move, but it's probably not that serious. They're creating scenarios in their head to rationalize what's happening. But by the time the sun went down at about 5 p.m. and there was still no sign of these girls, they ended up calling the police and officially reporting the girls missing. By 6 p.m. that night, there is this massive search combing the trail looking for these girls, but all night they're looking everywhere with hundreds of searchers and there's no sign of them. The following day, on Tuesday, February 14th, one of the searchers was about a half mile away from the bridge where the girls have been taking those pictures, and they discovered the girls' bodies right next to a creek. The police didn't release their cause of death. However, they said without a doubt this is a homicide, because apparently the scene was incredibly disturbing and had at least 2 or 3 signatures. Signatures are things done to the victims that are above and beyond what is required to end their life. Things like writing on the victims or their body position, or much, much worse. And usually you only see signatures when you're dealing with a serial killer. 3 days after the bodies were discovered, police were able to extract some video from Libby's phone. It turns out when Libby was taking those pictures of Abby on the bridge and had just posted it to social media, apparently this guy had come on the bridge and Libby must have sensed danger and she began filming him. Now, there is apparently a video that starts from the bridge and lasts all the way through the girl's final moments, but the police would release a very small snippet of this recording because it showed who they believe is the killer walking towards them with his hands in his pockets looking down, and he says to them, "Guys, down the hill."
Guys, down the hill. Guys, down the hill.
Despite thousands of tips pouring in as soon as this video was made public, they still don't know who this guy is, no arrests have been made, and the case remains unsolved. Oxana Malaya was born November 4th, 1983, to very poor and alcoholic parents in the Ukraine. In the winter of 1986, when Oxana was only 3 years old, in a drunken stupor, her parents forgot about her outside in the cold of winter. And because she was locked out, instinctively she crawled towards the nearest source of warmth, which was the family's kennel, where a whole bunch of dogs were sleeping. And incredibly, once she crawled inside of this kennel, not only did the dogs allow her to sleep there that night, but they kind of embraced her as one of their own. The next day, Oxana did not go back in the house, and her parents seemingly did not notice her absence. And over the next 5 years, Oxana would stay with this family of dogs, essentially living like she was part of their pack, which meant over those 5 very formative years from ages 3 to 8 years old, Oxana had almost no interaction with humans. Oxana rapidly learned how to behave like a dog and began only walking on all fours. She would bark instead of try to speak, and she would eat raw meat. By the early 90s, Oxana no longer identified as a human. She identified as a dog. And it was in the early 90s when a passerby happened to see Oxana running around on all fours in the back of her house in the woods, and they called the police, wondering what was wrong with this person. The police show up, and Oksana's dog family runs out and starts barking at the police to protect Oxana, and Oxana would start barking ferociously to protect herself from being captured. But eventually the police would use meat to lure the rest of the dogs away so they could retrieve the child. When she was taken into custody, doctors saw that she not only had forgotten how to walk on 2 legs, she also couldn't speak. And doctors were concerned that because she had had almost no exposure to human language for all those formative early years, that she might not actually have the capacity to speak anymore. Oxana was taken to an orphanage where she would eventually learn how to walk on 2 legs, and amazingly, she would learn how to speak. But despite these incredible gains she made towards re-entering society, her experience living with the dogs had really left a mark on her. Although she could speak, she could only speak in monotone with no rhythm and no intonation, and it was actually difficult to follow what she was saying because of that. A psychologist did an assessment of Oxana and determined that her mental capacity was only that of a 6-year-old, despite being a young adult at the time of this assessment. By the time she was 22 years old and had more or less re-entered society, she finally was able to have a boyfriend, and he didn't know much about her past. But when she decided to show him how easy it was for her to run around and bark like a dog, it apparently scared him, and he broke up with her and did not see her again. Today, Oxana lives on a farm taking care of animals, and she was recently interviewed on a Ukrainian talk show where she says she no longer wants to live like or act like a dog, she just wants to be a person. Here is some footage of Oxana Malaya acting like a dog.
I've said this before, but AI is evil. So there's this video of me circulating where I am telling stories like I do on here. The only problem is it's not me. It's a AI generated version of my likeness. Okay, it sounds like me, it looks like me. These stories are actually not bad at all. But the crazy thing is, it's not me. And I think that AI has an agenda, and I think that's already been accomplished. I think it's set into a motion of events that is going to slowly take over society. And when you look at how good AI is getting at replicating people, But what's interesting about all of this is AI made me kind of think of something else that I've spoken of. The mimic, right? What does the mimic do? It sort of mimics people and things, right, to trick people, to lure them in. And when you think about AI, it's very similar to a lot of these supernatural entities that I talk about, right? In a way, it is sort of a shapeshifter that can change itself to mirror anyone or anything. So, what do you think? What do you think of AI? Will it eventually take over the world? Do you think there's something to this? Do you think it could be evil? There's something definitely going on at Yosemite. Now, out of all the parks I've been to, it is by far the creepiest. There was this man named Tom. Tom and his friend Benny, they decided they were going to go hiking in northern Yosemite, which happens to be the most remote part of the park. Now, they set off on this 10-mile hike, and they got to about the 4-mile marker when Benny had to use the restroom. So he goes off the trail into the woods, and Tom waits for him. Well, 5 minutes pass, Benny doesn't return. 10 minutes pass, he still doesn't return. 15 minutes pass, and he still hasn't come back. So Tom's like, maybe I should go check on him, like something might be wrong. So he heads off the trail and he goes into the woods, into the direction Benny went. As he's walking through the woods, he's yelling, Benny, Benny, where are you? And he doesn't hear anything. But that's when he realized, like, he didn't hear the birds chirping. He didn't hear any insects. It was completely quiet. Then he hears Benny's voice say, I'm over here. So he goes in that direction. And he follows the sound of Benny's voice. But then he comes out to the spot and he sees Benny is on the ground. Something has attacked him and he is not moving. But he still hears Benny talking. And when he looks up and over in front of him, he sees this very large man that he described had the face of a deer, but it was human. He said he took off running as fast as he could through the woods. This thing began to chase him. He would go one way and this thing would be in front of him. He would go the other way and it would still be in front of him. He could not get away from it. Eventually, he makes it back to the trail. And as he's running along this trail, he smacks into someone. And as he looks up, it's Benny. And he goes, hey, Benny, like, what happened to you? Where'd you go? Like, are you okay? Are you hurt? And Benny's like, well, you know, after I went into the woods to use the restroom, I heard you calling my name, telling me to follow you. So I went in that direction, and I ended up here. So he tells Benny, he says, that wasn't me. We need to leave now. So they take off running as fast as they can, and they make it back off the trail. And as they are leaving this section of the park, they could hear these loud screams coming from behind them. There's a reason they say when you are camping in the Appalachian Mountains that you sleep through the night in a tent. And you make sure that tent is sealed up and you don't come out until the light comes out. Now, there were these two hikers who were hiking along the Appalachian Trail. And after a long day's hike, they found themselves at Locust Gap campsite. So they pitch their tent and they get a good sized fire going and they decide to turn it in early for the night. As they're sleeping, at around midnight, one of the hikers awakes and he hears someone calling his name. And it sounds exactly like his friend, the other hiker. And his friend is telling him, come on out of the tent. Come on out here. And he says, you know, it's midnight. Why do you want me to come out? Like, I'm asleep. And once again, it beckons him, come on out here. Come on out here. But when he turns, he sees that his friend, the other hiker, is over in the corner of the tent, bunched up. He's shaking and he's scared. And he whispers to his friend, that is not me. And for what seems like hours, they hear this thing beckoning them to come out of the tent. And it is using each one of their voices. So after a couple hours of this just continuous chanting and calling them out of the tent. They finally decide to unzip the tent and look outside. And when they slowly lift the zipper up and they get a small section opened, they look out and they see what looks like a man with the face of a deer standing there staring at them. They said he started to wave his finger, beckoning them to come into the woods. So they quickly zipped up the tent and they just huddled together, and all night long they were called to. But eventually the morning came, and when they opened the tent and they went outside, they found that there were all of these deer staring at them from outside the tent. And they didn't move, they just kept looking at them as they unpacked their tent, and as they packed up their bags and left, they could see these deer just staring at them. I don't know. It's kind of hard sometimes to come up, tell us.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Oh, she's like, that was weird. Somehow she knew it was related to the fast that she did, but how? Like, why would her grandma think she trying to kill her? Like, what? Anyway, fast forward to like a month, right? Within that month, I might add, she was also doing some of the teas that I have in the ebook because, yes, teas are good for you, you know, physically, but it's also good for you spiritually, too. I have different teas, how they help you, the ones that boost your intuition, you know. But within that month, she lost 20 pounds because the fasting that she did actually gave her a little boost that she needed to actually start eating healthy. She was drinking the tea. Y'all, I am tripping. That girl did not lose 20 pounds. And what the hell I was seeing? 8 pounds, not 20. Said that, I'm like, wait, 20 pounds in a month? That girl lying, but I had to go back and check. Anyway, that's just a little like side effect. That was like a good side effect. Anyway, so a month later, her mom calls her like, hey, we gotta go down to grandma's house. And she like, okay, why? What happened? Her mom tells her that grandma's sick and it's bad. She's like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, I'll pack my stuff. You let me know when you know, whatever. So they leave, they go see grandma. As soon as she gets to the house and she walks in the house, grandma starts screaming for her to get out. Now, grandma is perfectly fine mentally. The sickness that she has is body. But when Emily walked in and she immediately screamed at Emily, telling Emily, keeping that in there, I don't care. Anyway, she's telling Emily to get out. Emily's confused. Everybody else is confused. Emily's mom, let's call her Mary. Mary is talking to her mom like, why are you telling Emily to get out? Like, we came here to help you. We came here to be there for you. And grandma starts screaming, I told you you should have aborted her. So backstory. Emily's mom got pregnant with Emily when she was 15 years old and gave birth to her at 16. At the time, she was living with her mom, which is the grandma. Grandma, obviously, like, you know, when that happened, she got in trouble. She was pissed. So grandma tried to convince her to get an abortion. However, Emily was terrified. Emily's mom. She was terrified, and everybody else around the mom, her friends, was also telling her, because at the time in Nigeria, a lot of girls were passing away from that because they were going to some dirty ass somebody basement, you know. So everybody was telling her like, no, like we want to keep her here. So she ended up keeping Emily. Mind you, Emily don't know nothing about this. She's just now finding out. Grandma is going berserk. As she's going berserk, she just passes out. Passes out for like 3 seconds and wakes back up. And when she wakes back up, you can physically tell that that is not the same person. Now, Emily didn't want to get into too many details because that was very traumatizing for her. To give a long story short, when grandma was trying to convince Emily's mom to abort Emily, and Emily wasn't going for it, nobody else was going for it, the dad wasn't going for it, like nobody was going for it, she decided to take it upon herself to go to a voodoo priest and sacrifice Emily in the belly. But because of Emily's dad's side of the family, she was protected, so she couldn't sacrifice Emily in the way that we're thinking. What she was able to do was assign her a spiritual husband in the womb in exchange for some things that she wanted. So given the fact that Emily just kind of broke that bond with the spiritual husband, the deal is done. So that's why she was on the phone like, you trying to kill me? So they find all of this out in one night. Emily's shocked. Emily's mom is shocked. But like I said, she wasn't the best mom or grandma. So although it was shocking, it was still like not so shocking. It was just like, you really went that low? Now fast forward to this year. She's been trying to reach out to both Emily and her mom because they actually went no contact. Now, this was hard because when they tried to go no contact, y'all know Africans. Like, Africans don't believe in that. So families were trying to guilt trip them like that's your mom at the end of the day. So it took a very long time for them to actually really go no contact. But her and her mom, they're doing it so far. And she just wanted to tell me the story so that I can tell you guys. And so that you can go get your own ebook and find out some deep family secrets. Damn, like I didn't expect any of this when I wrote the book, I promise. Anyways, don't forget to let me know what you guys are eating. Don't forget to look forward to my song, please. Okay, I love you, bye. Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, you won't forget. Don't eat too much, because you gotta stay fine. But come on, bestie, it's story time! How did I even come up with that song? I don't even remember, but y'all love it. I love it too, though. But hey, bestie, I missed you. You got your snack? You got your rolling equipment? Okay. Gentle reminder that I'm dropping my song on Valentine's Day, so check that out. It's like an early 2000s dance hall kind of song, you know? Anyway, let's get to the story. The story is actually from Nigeria. So let's call her Emily. So Emily follows me, obviously. And one day, Emily was scrolling through TikTok. And she stumbled upon one of my videos where I was explaining how you probably have bad energy on you and you don't even know. And so I was, saying the signs and stuff. For example, if it don't matter how long you sleep, when you wake up, you still feel drained. And not drained from being tired, but more so drained like somebody's feeding off your energy. I also said if you wake up randomly at 3 a.m. all the time, I was, naming a couple stuff that could let you know. And so I was kind of like checking off everything that was happening to her. So she was like, oh. And that was around the time when I first came out with my ebook. I don't know if y'all remember. So I was promoting and everything. Now, this story is in the time frame of a year because I dropped my ebook last year, like around this time. Anyway, she saw it. She lives in Nigeria. She wanted to support me, so she got the book. She read the book. She loved it. She didn't actually really use it. Like, she got it, but she said she was gonna use it, but never did, right? So, 2 weeks passed, and she's scrolling on TikTok again. She's, looking for one of my stories. And so she finds the story, snack time, whatever. But that time, I was talking about a spiritual husband. Y'all know I be talking about that. And then she started to realize everything I was saying in that video, it started checking off for her, too. She can't keep a relationship. Sometimes she'll wake up with bruises. And she's Nigerian, so she knows about these things, right? However, she don't really want to get into it. So the most that she does is, she prays. But she's also not a big religious person either. She doesn't go to church, Anyway, she's like, you know what? I'm finally going to use the ebook. So she decides to do that. Now, she couldn't really do, some of the spiritual baths because some of the ingredients in Nigeria, she couldn't really find. But, of course, she did the fast. So, first day of fasting, everything went fine. She goes to sleep. And, of course, here come the nightmares. I don't understand why all these stories are kind of, the same. You know what I mean? There's always a nightmare after the first day. Or, it's after the last day. Anyway, so, she goes to sleep that night. She wakes up and she's in sleep paralysis, right? There's a man, an angry looking man with no face. The man has no face, but somehow she can tell that the man is angry. And he's just at the foot of her bed, just staring. The energy felt scary. But she said for some reason, she didn't feel scared. She was supposed to, but she was gaining some kind of confidence. So boom, that happens. Now at the time the book had just came out, so I didn't have too many reviews I be telling y'all. So immediately she starts getting scared. She's like, oh my God, what did Blizzy put in this book? Did this girl just curse me? What is happening? So she's on freak out mode. But then she felt it in her spirit to just keep doing the fast, right? She had to think about it she kind of is doing this because she feels like she has a spiritual husband. So the fact that she just dreamt of a man standing at the foot of her bed, maybe she's doing the right thing, right? So cool. So she does the second day. That night, everything's fine. No nightmare. She slept normally. The fast went great. And so she goes on to the third day of fasting. Third day. So she does the third day of fasting. Everything goes well. That night, She's anxious. She's expecting, she goes to sleep. She wakes up in the middle of the night at exactly 3:03 a.m. She went to the bathroom and just started throwing up her life away. Like she's throwing her guts out. She genuinely feels like she's about to pass away. But eventually she stops throwing up after about 3 hours of throwing up. It's 6 in the morning now. The sun is starting to come out. Finally, she stopped throwing up and she is so drained that she passes out right in front of the toilet. She said she had to have been passed out from between 5 to 10 minutes, because when she woke up as if she didn't even just pass out. She had all the energy in the world. She's not dehydrated right now from throwing up for 3 hours. She gets up, she drinks some water, she eats some food, she goes on about her day. She feels great, she feels fine. And so in the middle of her day, she gets a phone call from her grandma. She picks up the phone, she's like, "Hey grandma." Immediately her grandma is cursing her out. And I mean calling her out her name, cursing her out. Now, growing up, her and her grandma didn't really have much of a relationship. She always felt as though her grandma didn't like her. So they never really had much of, but that's her grandma, So grandma's on the phone I always knew you was a disappointment. You want to kill me. You want to kill me. So Emily's on the phone "No, ma, I don't want to kill you. Or why would I want to kill you? I didn't do anything to you now. And grandma's on the phone "You will not kill me. You will not kill me." And grandma hangs up. She's confused. But little did she know, shit's about to get real.
I've tried recording this video. This is my 4th time. For some reason, whatever is happening won't let me fucking talk about it. And it's getting a little frustrating. So excuse my attitude first thing in the morning. 4 times. Let's try it. 4th time's a charm. Let's try it again from the top. We're going to talk about objects in my Japanese house that would move. That would be taken and put back in some weird places, you guys. It wasn't just the iPod in the tatami room that got misplaced. It happened often. There was one incident where I'm at my little desk and I'm writing an essay for AP English. So I have my notebook, I have my book, and I have my pencil. I put the pencil down on the desk and I go downstairs to get a cup of water. Okay? I come back up the stairs. That pencil was in the middle of the room. Now you could think, oh, it rolled off the desk because it's a pencil. And that's what I thought too. But the pencil was 5 feet in the middle of my room, perfectly placed on top of a little area rug that I had. And I picked it up and I thought, that's really weird. And I continued doing my homework as if nothing happened. That one I could ignore. Another incident was early in the morning. I take my PJs off. I drop them to the ground. They're on the floor in a little pile. I put on my school clothes. I go downstairs to have breakfast. I come back upstairs to grab my backpack. My PJs were hanging up on the door frame. Once again, you could think, oh, your mom did it. No, she was downstairs in the kitchen the whole time. And she wouldn't have put my clothes up on the door frame. She would have put them in a dirty hamper. But first she would have yelled at me about leaving my clothes on the floor. She wouldn't have just grabbed them and hung them up. They were on the door frame, on the corner of the door frame, just hanging there. I remember taking them off, putting them in my closet in my dirty hamper, thinking that's fucking strange. And then there was a third incident that happened that I can't ignore, that I can't explain. I'm coming home from school. I get out of my school clothes. Once again, they're on a pile on the floor. I get into my loungewear. I take that pile of clothing and I throw it into the closet. And it makes it kind of half in the closet, half out of the closet. And I think to myself, great, I gotta go actually in the closet and put these things away. They're on the floor. I get this really strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Very uneasy, queasy, kind of just kind of feeling as I look at the clothing on the floor. And I watch them as they get pulled into the closet. It's like they retracted back. And in the moment, I thought it was my little sister fucking with me. So I grab the closet door, I throw it open because it slides. throw it open expecting to find her and scare the shit out of her. And there was nothing in my closet except a pile of clothing on the floor. And I remember sliding that closet door fast, so fucking fast, so scared, and I back up and I think, what the fuck was that? Because I know I saw my clothes get pulled into the closet, but when I went to go check it out, there was nothing there. What pulled my fucking clothes into the closet, you guys? My sister wasn't in there, my mom, no one was in there. Why would my mom be in my closet scaring me? There was nothing. And I still can't explain how. I wish I could plug you guys into my mind and watch how creepy it was for my clothing to get pulled into the closet. It makes you feel insane, you guys. Things would happen in this house often that would make you question your sanity.
There's something definitely going on at Yosemite. Now, out of all the parks I've been to, it is by far the creepiest. There was this man named Tom. Tom and his friend Benny, they decided they were going to go hiking in northern Yosemite, which happens to be the most remote part of the park. Now, they set off on this 10-mile hike, and they got to about the 4-mile marker when Benny had to use the restroom. So he goes off the trail into the woods, and Tom waits for him. Well, 5 minutes pass, Benny doesn't return. 10 minutes pass, he still doesn't return. 15 minutes pass, and he still hasn't come back. So Tom's like, maybe I should go check on him, like something might be wrong. So he heads off the trail and he goes into the woods, into the direction Benny went. As he's walking through the woods, he's yelling, Benny, Benny, where are you? And he doesn't hear anything. But that's when he realized, like, he didn't hear the birds chirping. He didn't hear any insects. It was completely quiet. Then he hears Benny's voice say, I'm over here. So he goes in that direction. And he follows the sound of Benny's voice. But then he comes out to the spot and he sees Benny is on the ground. Something has attacked him and he is not moving. But he still hears Benny talking. And when he looks up and over in front of him, he sees this very large man that he described had the face of a deer, but it was human. He said he took off running as fast as he could through the woods. This thing began to chase him. He would go one way and this thing would be in front of him. He would go the other way and it would still be in front of him. He could not get away from it. Eventually, he makes it back to the trail. And as he's running along this trail, he smacks into someone. And as he looks up, it's Benny. And he goes, hey, Benny, like, what happened to you? Where'd you go? Like, are you okay? Are you hurt? And Benny's like, well, you know, after I went into the woods to use the restroom, I heard you calling my name, telling me to follow you. So I went in that direction, and I ended up here. So he tells Benny, he said, that wasn't me. We need to leave now. So they take off running as fast as they can, and they make it back off the trail. And as they are leaving this section of the park, they could hear these loud screams coming from behind them.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. Back in 2007, I was working as a fire investigator for a large, fully paid fire department. I'd already been on the job long enough to know the difference between fear, adrenaline, and imagination, and that's important for this story. One night, just after 2 in the morning, we got a massive call, a 4-alarm fire at a complex of 6 large buildings that had been standing since the early 1900s. Heavy timber construction, thick brick walls, and each building somewhere between 7 and 9 stories tall. For decades, the floors had been cleaned with oil-based chemicals. Over time, that oil soaked into the wood, so when the fire took hold, the entire complex might as well have been one giant box of matches. By the time the fire was under control, 3 of the 6 buildings were completely destroyed. Later that afternoon, the investigators, including myself, were on site having a meeting, going over the next steps. That's when a captain from one of the engine companies approached us. He looked unsettled, to say the least. He told us that while he'd been checking for fire extension in the 4th building,
one of the ones still standing, he heard something he couldn't explain. He described hearing several blood-curdling screams. They sounded human, male, and they were coming from what he believed was the basement area. The problem was, the basement had taken on a huge amount of water during firefighting efforts. Visibly was almost non-existent, and with the water depth and limited lighting, he couldn't do a full search. By the next day, we knew the water would have drained out. So, I volunteered to go check it out. Just me and a large flashlight. I entered the building from street level, which, because of how the building was constructed, was actually the 3rd floor. Below that was a sub-basement, and then the basement itself. 5 levels down. The moment I stepped inside, everything disappeared into darkness. Where my flashlight wasn't directly pointed, there was nothing. Complete blackness. I couldn't even see my own hand in front of my face. The only sounds were my breathing and the slow creaking and popping of the old wooden stairwell as I began making my way down. Firefighting is mostly done in pitch black conditions, so the darkness itself didn't scare me. This was familiar territory. When I reached the sub-basement level, that's when it happened. From somewhere further down the stairs, I heard a clear, unmistakable male voice. Stop. Don't go any further. It wasn't distorted. It wasn't demonic. It didn't sound threatening. It was just a man's voice. Deep, slightly gruff, calm even. I froze. For a moment, I told myself it was just my mind filling in the silence. That happens sometimes in extreme environments. I raised my flashlight and aimed it down into the stairwell. The distance between floors was about 20 feet, so I couldn't see the next landing. But I should have at least seen the outline of it. Instead, the light just disappeared, like the darkness swallowed it. I took 2 more steps down, and then my heart nearly stopped. The voice came again, louder this time, stronger. No hesitation. Stop. That was it for me. I turned around almost immediately and started climbing back up. I was shaking, full body shaking, but I couldn't move fast. Every step had to be deliberate. I had to visualize each stair as my flashlight revealed it, one at a time. When I finally made it back outside into the sunlight, I felt like I'd surfaced from underwater. I told my chief that the basement was too dark to safely and adequately search. I didn't mention the voice. If I had, he would have told me I was losing it. Later that week, the decision was made to demolish the building. Once the debris was cleared down to the basement level, we brought in a cadaver dog. The dog didn't hit on anything. To be absolutely certain, we also had a forensic team comb through the area. They found nothing. No remains, no evidence, no explanation. I don't know how you'd classify what happened down there, but I'll go to my grave knowing exactly what I heard.
Mexican folklore is the absolute best, and this is a hill I will die on. And many urban legends that are in Texas actually come from Mexico, because at one point that part of Texas was northern Mexico. I am going to absolutely butcher this word because my second language is English, my first language is German, but El Camaroncito is a nightclub that is off Old Highway 90 on the southwest side of San Antonio. There is a legend of a nightclub that was there in 1975. This is when the story first started circulating. These women were at these nightclub and a handsome stranger walked in and started asking all of the women to dance. This guy was like super good looking, one of the best looking men that they had ever seen, and every woman he asked to dance, and he asked all of them, were put into some kind of trance. There was one woman who was able to break this trance, and she looked down and saw that his feet were chicken feet. She screamed, your feet," and that is when the handsome stranger ran into the bathroom, never to be seen again. Now, in some variations of the story, he had one like cloven foot and then one foot that was a chicken foot. But either way, this seems to be a sign of witchcraft or a sign that he was the devil himself. And this would stand to reason considering that he was incredibly good looking and apparently a really good dancer, and he was able to put these women in a trance. So what was his deal? What did he want that night? Now, the story itself has changed multiple times. Sometimes it's just like this party, sometimes it is a bar, sometimes it is a nightclub, and sometimes it's 2 chicken feet, sometimes it's cloven hoof and then a chicken foot. But either way, I feel like the story is really chilling. So what are your thoughts? Do you think it was the devil himself? Is it all just a story, or did it really happen? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more spooky things.
How am I just now finding out that before we had crash dummies, we literally used to use dead people? If this is news to you like it was to me, then yes, before crash test dummies, computer modeling, even before real safety standards, real human bodies were the only way engineers could learn what actually causes fatal injuries in car crashes. From the 1940s through the 1970s, car crashes were killing thousands of people a year just in the US alone. So engineers realized that they had a problem. The only way to design cars that don't kill people is to understand how people die in crashes. But they had no reliable data showing what our bodies can handle when we're in this type of accident. They were trying to answer questions like how much force the skull can take before it becomes fractured, what speed snaps a human neck, how the ribs and spine collapse on impact, and what a quick deceleration does to our internal organs. Sadly, before the idea to use cadavers came along, live animals were used first, like pigs and dogs, but they weren't anatomically close enough to humans for us to get accurate data. So bodies that were donated to science, or the remains of those that were left unclaimed at the funeral home, were used in this experiment. The bodies were taken and with sensors placed on the skull, chest, and limbs, were strapped into car seats on sled tracks and slammed into barriers. They were also dropped from high heights to measure the skull fracture threshold, subjected to chest compressions to see how much it takes to collapse ribs, and just like our crash dummies today, filmed with high-speed cameras during impact. Now, this sounds incredibly morbid and disturbing because it is. Being desensitized enough to handle a human body in this way for your day-to-day job is kind of horrific, but they learned a lot from these trials, and almost every modern car safety feature exists today because a cadaver was able to demonstrate how a person could die in a car accident.
So I like photos like this, the ghost photos where the ghost is in the photo, but it's not what you think it is. So you probably think, oh, maybe it's that. That's a jacket that's just lying behind the vehicle or whatever. But they had pulled over to take a photo of the gorgeous scenery. The wife took a photo of the husband taking a photo of the mountains and whatever, and then she noticed something. Now, do you see it? Again, it's not the jacket behind the SUV. Do you see it now? This right here. Now, what do you think? Do you think pareidolia? Do you think it's Count Dracula? Do you think it's a woman? There's lots of different theories. I can definitely see like a face of something. I don't know. I can't tell if it's like in front of the car, in the car. I don't really know. Nowadays, people mess with photos a lot, so it's hard to tell like what's real, what's not, what's like a play on something. But she said that there was nothing in front of the vehicle and there was nothing in the vehicle. So I don't know. You decide for yourself. Let's look at it again from far away. See, it's kind of creepy looking. I can see why she was like, what's that? I would have been like that too. Now, I'm not there, so I wouldn't be able to like check it out and see what it is, but interesting. Ghost, no ghost.
You guys want to know the worst thing about true crime is that you're never going to run out of stories to tell, and I hate that. I love making videos for you guys. I feel so lucky that I can. I feel so lucky for this little community, but it truly is so sad that there's never a shortage of stories. Sunday morning, February 1st of 2026, a church in Arizona is filling up with all of their regulars for their Sunday morning service. But one familiar face is missing, which is pretty strange because she never misses church. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, a mom, a grandma, and a regular churchgoer, was nowhere to be seen. And for anyone and everyone who knows Nancy, her absence at church immediately meant that something was wrong. The people from the church were so concerned that even they reached out to Nancy's family members to let them know that she did not make it to church that morning because it was just that out of character. Because of that, at 11:56 in the morning that same day, family members arrived at Nancy Guthrie's house in the Catalina foothills, an area just north of Tucson. And this just happened, by the way. I'm sure every single one of you has seen it on the news, but what they found would trigger one of the most intensive missing people investigations Arizona has ever seen. Nancy was gone, and her personal belongings, including her phone and essential medications, were still inside the home. There were also red drops on her front porch. Her front door security camera was also missing. Like, it looked like it was just completely removed from the property on purpose. And everything inside of that house would later be described by a sheriff as very concerning and inconsistent with a voluntary disappearance. For a woman with limited mobility who requires medication day to day to survive, this was way more than just unusual. This was terrifying. By 12:03 p.m., her family members had called 911, authorities were dispatched, and they arrived 10 minutes later at 12:13 p.m. And immediately, again, from the scene, it was just obvious that this wasn't just a missing person person's case, it was an abduction. Whatever happened did not happen on Nancy's terms. The sheriff even stated from the beginning, I believe that she has been abducted. And from that moment on, it was all hands on deck to try and figure out, where is Nancy Guthrie? Nancy Long Guthrie was born in January of 1942 in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She's been described as a woman defined by faith, resilience, and an unwavering devotion to her family. In the early 1970s, Nancy, along with her husband Charles Guthrie, made the decision to move to Arizona, where Nancy would spend more than 5 decades building a life and raising her 3 children, Charles, Cameron, Annie, and Savannah. At the time of her disappearance, again, very recent, she was very active in her community, a regular churchgoer, and someone who was very, very close to all of her children and her grandchildren. Nancy did live alone after her husband's passing, but she was far from isolated. She was always doing something, talking to someone. Her family checked in regularly on her. And even though she did face some health challenges living with a pacemaker and relying on daily medication for a chronic condition, according to family members, even at her age, 84 years old, she was still, quote, as sharp as tack with no cognitive impairments. So yeah, she does need daily medication in order to survive, which of course only adds a layer of danger to her disappearance. But the point I'm trying to make is that she was sharp, so it's not like she would have wandered off and gotten lost accidentally or anything like that. County sheriff would later emphasize this point, stating, quote, Nancy Guthrie is of great sound mind. This is not a dementia-related case. Now let's talk about Nancy's youngest daughter, Savannah, and part of the reason as to why this case is so widespread. Savannah Guthrie is co-anchor and host of NBC's Today Show, and she is very well known. And Savannah, being as big of a public figure as she is only part of the reason as to why this case has been on every headline, apart from it obviously being a horrific story. And Savannah, along with her siblings, have spoken publicly about the situation, but we will get into that in a second. So Nancy is reported a missing person. Authorities from the jump stating that everything that they have so far is pointing to her being taken involuntarily. She didn't go on her own accord. One of the first things they do, of course, is start retracing Nancy's steps, beginning from the night before her disappearance, and slowly but surely, with the help of forensic evidence, security camera data, and medical device information, the county sheriff's department starts putting together a timeline. On Saturday, the night before, January 31st, Nancy calls an Uber to go to her daughter Annie's house for dinner. She got there, they ate, they had a lovely evening playing cards and hanging out, nothing out of the ordinary. Around 9:45 p.m., Nancy is taken home by her son-in-law and dropped off back at her house. Nancy's garage door was recorded opening at approximately 9:48 p.m. and closing presumably behind her at 9:50 p.m. Everything appeared to be normal. We can assume that Nancy started getting ready for bed, and back at their own home, Annie and her family had no reason to worry. At 1:47 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera disconnects, just completely stops working. Approximately at 2:17 p.m., about 30 minutes after the doorbell camera was disconnected, one of the security cameras detected movement. However, according to authorities, they were unable to retrieve the footage from this detection, so we don't know who it was or what it was. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnects from its monitoring app, leaving them to assume that something happened around that time to Nancy that caused the pacemaker to disconnect. Between 2:28 a.m. and the sunrise, the timeline goes dark, and by Sunday morning, the people in her life realize that Nancy is missing. Nancy's house was closed off as a crime scene, and the red splatters on the front porch were tested and confirmed to be that of Nancy Guthrie's DNA. And keep in mind, the pressure on this investigation is strong because of the daily medicine that Nancy needs to be taking in order to survive. So on top of already wanting to move fast, the extra layer of not knowing what condition Nancy was in, or if she was even still alive, only makes it that much scarier and that much more tense. By day 3 of the investigation, multiple law enforcement agencies were coming together to work together on this case. The County Sheriff's Department, the FBI, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, search and rescue teams from multiple jurisdictions, K9 units, drone teams with thermal image capabilities, aerial resources, including helicopters. It really was a case of all hands on deck. Sorry, I keep saying was, it really is a case of all hands on deck. Authorities also began conducting interviewing the Uber driver who took Nancy to Annie's home on Saturday evening, family members including all 3 of Nancy's children, housekeeping staff who worked at Nancy's home, friends from her church, neighbors in and around her area. They continued on the forensic investigation, combing through her house to try and find any piece of evidence or DNA or anything that could point them in the right direction. They zeroed in on details, for example, the missing front door camera. Why would someone specifically remove that camera? Were they caught on video? Did they know that the camera was there before they arrived? How would they have known? How did they get in the house? The pacemaker data was also analyzed. The fact that it disconnected from its monitoring app at 2:28 a.m. was a crucial data point. But why? And what did it mean? Digital forensics teams analyzed Nancy's phone, her computer, her email accounts, her social media presence, looking for anything odd, unusual communications, or patterns that may help explain what happened to her. On Monday, February 3rd, Savannah Guthrie made the family's first public statement. Less than 48 hours after her mother was discovered missing, Savannah Guthrie shared a message on Instagram. It was brief, but it was heartfelt. It just said, "Please pray." Then she released a longer statement through NBC that reads, quote, "On behalf of our family, I want to thank everyone for the thoughts, prayers, and messages of support. Right now, our focus remains on the safe return of our dear mom. We thank law enforcement for their hard work on this case and encourage anyone with information to contact the County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. The first video appeal from Nancy's kids came on Wednesday, February 4th. Wednesday evening, Savannah posted nearly a 4-minute video to Instagram. She appeared in the middle, sitting down alongside her siblings, Annie and Cameron Guthrie. All three were visibly emotional but controlled. They were speaking directly to the camera and directly to whoever might have their mother. Savannah described her mother as, quote, "a kind, faithful, loyal, fiercely loving woman of goodness and light and God's precious daughter," end quote. And then she stated the direct appeal. Savannah addressed the reports of a ransom letter that had been sent to media outlets saying, quote, "As a family, we are doing everything we can. We are ready to talk. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know without a doubt that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you and we are ready to listen. Please reach out to us." She was begging for proof of life, to know that their mom was and is still alive. On Thursday, February 5th, Day 5, the FBI announced a $50,000 reward for any information leading to the recovery of Nancy Guthrie and or the arrest or conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance. That same day, Nancy's son, Savannah's brother, also spoke out saying, quote, "This is Cameron Guthrie. I'm speaking for the Guthrie family. Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you. We haven't heard anything directly. We need you to reach out and we need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward. But first, we need to know that you have our mom." The Guthrie family then released another video Saturday evening on February 7th, but this time the message was different. This time they claimed to have received some sort of communication. Savannah, next to her siblings, looking directly at the camera, said, quote, "We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us and we will pay. We will pay." 3 simple words that confirmed what many people were suspecting. Ransom demands had been made and the family was willing to meet them. And again, back to the reports of the 3 big media outlets stating that they had also received ransom notes in regards to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. The details of these slowly started to be revealed, showing that there was some sort of demanding cryptocurrency and deadlines. CNN stated that a ransom note was sent to their station demanding money for Nancy's return. TMZ also received an alleged ransom note demanding a specific substantial amount of Bitcoin. But from what I could find on the internet, the latest deadline listed on the ransom note was Monday, February 9th at 5 p.m. From my understanding and what I found online, no money has been paid, and obviously we are now past that deadline. As of today, February 10th, there has been a major development. The FBI released surveillance images showing a potential subject. The 4 images show a person wearing gloves, a mask, and a backpack appearing to tamper with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance, which is huge and terrifying. As far as how they got those images, because I was a little bit confused because I thought the camera wasn't working, blah, 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 it's been stated, quote, "Over the last 8 days, the FBI and the County Sheriff's Department have been working closely with our private sector partners to continue to recover any images or video footage from Nancy Guthrie's home that may have been lost, corrupted, or inaccessible due to a variety of factors, including the removal of the recording devices. The video was recovered from residual data located in back-end systems. Working with our partners, as of this morning, law enforcement has uncovered these previously inaccessible new images showing an individual appearing to have tampered with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance." I just went on Savannah's Instagram. She has shared these photos online saying, quote, "We believe that she is still alive. Bring her home. Anyone with information, please contact 1-800-CALL-FBI, 1-800-225-5324, or the County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. I feel so terrible for their family, and I just hope that she is found safe. I know so many of you guys are keeping up with this. I know I am, but I know that you guys are as well because so many of you guys have been messaging me. So let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know what you think / hope is going to happen. Obviously, we all want the best result, but we will have to wait and see. That is all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. Also, yes, my video from yesterday got removed. Like, please. I'm going to post it on YouTube Shorts, like right now. So if you want to go watch it, go there. Love you.
Every single state in the US has had at least one serial killer, if not multiple, a horrifying fact we've been talking about for almost a year at this point, and today I'm going to be telling you guys about one of the most notorious killers that ever was in Maine. Today we are talking about Richard Evanitz. He offended in multiple states, not just Maine. What he potentially did in Maine greatly affected and still to this day haunts the community there. And originally I was going to tell you guys about John Joubert. Last minute I decided to tell you guys about him instead. So I'm not going to get too much into Richard's history. It doesn't really matter too much, but just know that his dad sucked, and that's honestly an understatement. He was horrible. He belittled Richard. He called him a moron, all these horrible names. And then when he was only 6 years old, he literally drowned his pet dog in front of him and then tried to drown him as well. Horrible, abusive in multiple different ways, like terrible dad. So obviously he had trauma and self-image issues later, and that comes into play with everything he does. It doesn't excuse anything. Obviously there's no excuse for anything he does, but it does give you some insight into kind of what I would say like broke him and made him into the monster that he is. So on January 3rd of 1987 was his first documented crime. He would probably have been about 23, 24 years old at this point. He pulled up his car, and I have to really be careful with how I say this because of TikTok, and also I just don't want to say what he did. But he pulled his car up beside a 15-year-old girl named Kelly Ballard, who was walking home with her little sister. He exposed himself to her and then did stuff that I cannot say, then drove off, and basically he's a pervert. What he did should get him on a registered sex offender list immediately. And then the next day he was seen following Kelly and her mom into a mall parking lot, so he's literally stalking this 15-year-old little girl. And luckily Kelly's mom actually took down his license plate and reported it, and the police were able to arrest him a month later. He, however, did not get a good enough punishment. He was sentenced to 3 months probation. Not good enough. So the next year, because he's still free, on July 6th of 1988, a 12-year-old girl named Sarah Margaret Cherry was abducted while babysitting in her home in Bowdoin, Maine. She just vanishes, and unfortunately their worst fears come true while they are searching for her. Her body was found in a wooded area. She had been bound with rope and essayed multiple times. She'd been stabbed and strangled with a scarf. Again, she was only 12 years old and had to endure all of these things in her final moments. I will say that we don't know for sure if Richard is the one who abducted and killed her. I personally think he did, which is why I'm telling you guys about him for Maine. But in 1989, another man, his name was Dennis DeCane, was convicted of her murder. And he actually is in prison to this day for her murder, but he's always maintained his innocence. But in general, like, this is pretty controversial. Again, not everyone thinks that Dennis killed her. And we know that Richard was in Portland, Maine, which is nearby, on May 8th to May 31st, and then again later around the same time that she went missing. And we know that Richard kind of has this pattern of stalking his victims before taking them. It is completely possible that he saw her, stalked her, and then came back and killed her in July. Her body was found only 13 miles from the commissary where Richard was usually at when he was there in Maine. He also had access to a white Toyota Corolla, which is a car that was like spotted by witnesses near where Sarah's body was found. Again, to this day, Dennis is in prison for her murder. Many people, including myself, think it's more likely that Richard killed her, and so that is why I am telling you guys about him for Maine, because this 12-year-old little girl goes missing. She's abducted. It's horrific. It shakes the entire community to its core, and likely Richard is the person that did this. Around 8 years later, in 1996, few states south in Virginia, they have a serial stalker, and they call him the Route 29 stalker. It all started, as far as they know, on March 2nd of 1996. A 25-year-old named Alicia Reynolds left her home in Maryland, in Baltimore, and she was driving to Virginia. But she never made it, and at 6 p.m. her car was found abandoned along the highway. And after she was announced to be missing, witnesses came forward saying that they had seen Alicia along Route 29. They saw her talking to a man in a blue pickup truck, and that they were on the side of the road, and it seemed a little bit off. Her body ended up being discovered in a wooded area 15 miles southeast of where she had gone missing. And after her disappearance and everything like hit the news and people are realizing that like maybe there's a creepy guy in a blue truck out there, about 20 different women from the area came forward saying that while they're driving in the same area on Route 29, a man in a pickup truck, a blue pickup truck, tried to get them to pull over. He tried to pick them up. He tried to like get them to do stuff. A lot of women were made very uncomfortable by this person on this route. In addition, multiple different police officers think that they saw the same guy in the same truck harassing or stalking women along this road. Why they didn't intervene, I don't know. It's reported that as many as 3 separate times they thought they saw this guy stalking women. So now people are worried that there's some horrible, weird, creepy guy using Route 29 to stalk victims. And then on September 22nd of that same year, the burned remains of a 20-year-old, her name was Anne Carolyn McDaniel, were discovered less than 10 miles from where Alicia's body had been found, and she was going to hitchhike along Route 29. And then her charred, burned remains are found in the woods. When they do arrest Richard for other things that I'll get into in a minute, they connect him to Anne because they went into his footlockers at work and he had a piece of paper with directions to her body, like scribbled on them. That's not something you would accidentally have. That's not a coincidence. He wrote instructions to her dump site to go back and visit it, and they found it in his work locker. And so that's how they tied him to Anne. And that is why they think he's the Route 29 stalker, because they think that Anne was a victim of the Route 29 stalker, and now they think that the Route 29 stalker was Richard. Not only that, but on September 9th of 1996, so right before the discovery of Anne's body in the Route 29 case, Richard, and we know this for a fact, he abducts 16-year-old Sophia Marlene from her house in Virginia. She was last seen doing homework on the front steps of her house, and then she was taken, and it's apparently without any struggle, because he takes her in broad daylight while she's sitting on the porch of her house, and then she's just gone, and no one saw anything. And obviously she goes missing, no one knew what happened to her, and a month later, her decomposed body was found in a creek, and she was wrapped in a white cover, and her body had been shaved and, like, tampered with in certain areas that, like, I'm not going to say on this video, but just it was graphic and horrible, and whoever is doing this is a sick, disgusting person. The next year, on May 1st, he abducted 2 sisters, Kristen Michelle Lisk, who was 15, and her little sister, who was only 12, Catherine Nicole Lisk. They were last seen getting off of their school buses, and then they vanished, and now we know that he took them. Their father says that he came home from work and couldn't find his daughters. All he found was Kristen's book bag lying there, and it kind of had signs of a struggle. Like, she wouldn't have just left her backpack lying there and then left. Like, that just wouldn't have been something that happened. And so that's kind of what made him feel like something had gone wrong. We now know that he essayed both of them, strangled them, and then dumped their bodies in the South Anna River, and their bodies were both found 5 days after they disappeared. So Richard has just been a horrible guy. He's abducting little girls, little children, over and over again. And because he's crossing state lines and he's doing this in multiple different areas, and no one is seeing these girls disappear, no one is seeing who's taking them, they had no idea who was doing this, and they hadn't even connected all of these cases at this point. But a few years later, on June 24th of 2002, Richard ends up abducting 15-year-old Kara Robinson. And I have told her story on this page before individually. You can go listen to that. You have to scroll quite a ways. She also is on TikTok. She's an incredible human being and survivor, and you could go listen to her story directly from her. I recommend that you do, because it's always better to hear the story from the survivor than from a random person talking about it on the internet. But he abducted her when she was only 15 years old from her friend's yard in Lexington, South Carolina. He approached her offering pamphlets and asked, like, is there any adults around or anything like that? And when she said no, he pulls a gun on her from, like, behind a folder and says, get in the car, forces her into, like, a plastic bin in the back of his car, and then he drives off with her. And this is also in broad daylight. He abducts a girl in a neighborhood in the middle of the morning. And the fact that no one sees him doing this over and over again is absolutely insane. And it shows that he's done this many times, and that unfortunately he's very skilled in abducting little girls. So he ends up bringing her to his apartment. He, like, dragged the cooler container inside and then made her get out. He ties her to the bed and drugs her, and she's handcuffed by her hands and then bound at her feet. And then apparently he gets sleepy from all the horrific things he's been doing, because he decides to take a nap or go to sleep. And while he's asleep, she very quietly, because he's right next to her, very quietly starts to get out of her restraints. She frees her feet. She gets her hands free. She's still in the handcuffs, but they are no longer tied to the bed. And she goes to the front door. It's barricaded by a bunch of stuff, but she ends up removing it and sneaking out the front door. And he is living in, like, an apartment complex, basically, so all the buildings look the same. It's a very big area. She just, like, starts running for help. And she runs up to people driving and says, like, I've been abducted, please help me. They take her to the police, and they are like, what happened? She tells them about the horrible trauma she's just endured. And she says that the entire time that she was held prisoner, She was on a mission, and again, you should go listen to her telling the story, but she was on a mission to collect as much information and facts about the guy that did this to her, because she says she knew she was going to get free and she wanted to be able to identify who did this to her. So while she was his prisoner, she was looking at stuff on his fridge, she was looking at his house, she was trying to collect any information about him because she didn't know his name, and she got the number of his dentist and memorized it from a little card on his fridge, and like all these different insane facts that she was able to remember while going through this horrific traumatic event. She gives the police all this information, and they are able to figure out that it is Richard that kidnapped her. They go to the apartment, and she's able to help them identify which one he lives in, because she says that it's a guy that has birds and all these different animals. Landlord is like, oh yeah, that's this guy, and he brings them to the apartment, and they go to arrest him, and unfortunately he had already fled, because when he woke up and saw that Kara was gone, he obviously knew he was going to get caught. So now he's on the run, but fortunately Kara is safe and she's reunited with her family. He's on the run. There's a huge giant manhunt for him. While they are looking for him, they are also searching his apartment, and they find so many horrible things in his apartment. They find that the fluff that was on the handcuffs that Kara escaped with, that fluff was also found on Sophia's body, and then the sisters, Kristen and Catherine's bodies, and that's how they connected him to those kidnappings, because up until this point they didn't know who had done that. They also find hundreds of images and videos of children and nude girls on his computer or in Polaroids, and then they find lots of undergarments and other things that are unmentionable on TikTok or just in general because they're horrific. So they're like, this guy is just beyond disgusting and evil, and we have to get him because he will not stop. He will continue to do this if we do not find him. They are like trying to track him down, but they don't really know where he could have gone. But on June 27th, Richard ends up calling his sister, and she says that he said on the phone that he has committed more crimes than he can remember. And then he asked her to meet him at an IHOP in Florida. Says, okay, but instead, she's incredible. She calls the police and says, this is where my brother is. Like, he's not a good guy. Go get him. And I'm sure that wasn't easy for her to do, but thankfully she did that. And the police end up tracking him down in Florida after she calls and tells them this. And they corner him. They try to get him to surrender to the police, but he knows he's surrounded and he ends up taking his life instead. So they are not able to arrest him. They're not able to get justice for these girls, but he is no longer able to hurt anyone else. He's no longer on this earth. He offended in many states, not just Maine. And I know that like the one that I'm telling you guys for Maine is a little bit questionable if he did it. So felt like it was worth telling you guys about for this state, because when you talk about serial killers in Maine, Sarah Cherry's story does come up immediately. It's like haunts so much of the state. It dramatically altered the community, and Richard's name is a very terrifying one in that state. And so I felt like you guys should hear about this for Maine. We only have a few more states left in the series. I'm about to wrap it up. I do want to say that I've been hesitant to post Minnesota's video. I feel a little bit weird to be posting about Minnesota with everything horrific going on, and I want to proceed with as much caution as I can. I will be posting Minnesota soon, but just keep in mind that there are other things happening there right now that we should be talking about and being angry about as well.